Chapter 1150. 50,000 feet, 30,000 feet, 2,000 feet, 10,000 feet. Just as the Emperor of Dali, Shang Wudao was less than 10,000 feet away from Mu Kaiwei, who was fleeing with Meng Meng in her arms. A voice mixed with the world's angriest voice suddenly sounded from behind him. Shang Wudao, die. Oh no. Shang Wudao's eyelids twitched. He felt a cold, murderous aura behind him, like a ferocious beast that had escaped from its cage. The murderous aura surged violently. Boom! A fierce glint flashed across his eyes. Then, his body swayed as he changed his trajectory and dodged elsewhere. He knew very well that Yi Chen, who had escaped from Dao Master Tai and the rest, would not give him a chance to capture Mu Kaiwei and the rest. Even so, at that moment, he actually threw an Emperor's killer fist at Mu Kaiwei, who was 3,000 feet away. Ha ha ha, mad Southern Yi, you can't save them. Shang Wudao laughed sinisterly. Rumble. The Emperor's killer fist that condensed his full strength seemed to crack the sky as it tore through countless voids and charged straight at Mu Kaiwei and the other two. No. Under such terrifying might, all the hairs on Mu Kaiwei's body stood on end. Then, she chose to turn around and protect Meng Meng tightly in her arms. She did not consider whether she could protect the little girl like this. It was just a subconscious action. Boom! In the blink of an eye, a deafening roar rang out beside her ear, and a wisp of energy that spread out even cut open a shocking wound on her face. After that, there was no further movement. Mu Kaiwei and Jiu subconsciously turned around and saw a giant golden ape protecting them. Black energy surged in the giant golden ape's eyes. Its gaze was incomparably crazy, and its killing intent was like an ocean as it coughed up blood continuously. When Shang Wudao saw this, a chill shot through his heart. Crazy, he's really crazy. He's willing to take this punch of mine head-on to protect them. Young master, are you all right? Sob, sob, sob. Jiu could not hold back her tears and cried very hard. Yi Chen, Mu Kaiwei's heart ached. Meanwhile, the little girl in her arms cried and struggled as if she wanted to get down. Go, take my daughter away. Yi Chen could not care less about wiping the blood at the corner of his lip. He slapped the two women, causing them to fly backward uncontrollably. Yi Chen! Mu Kaiwei roared crazily, but she was unable to change anything. She could only watch helplessly. Yi Chen turned around slowly and glared at Shang Wudao coldly. You must die. The killing intent in his heart was like an erupting volcano. It was one thing for these people to want to kill him, but they didn't even spare a child. Shang Wudao felt a chill in his heart when he sensed Shi Ying's gaze, and then he shouted in a stern voice, Fellow Taoist Qianji, fellow Taoist Shi Ying, how long are you going to watch from the sidelines? Today, the four of us joined forces and we're still unable to kill this brat. Once we die, all of you won't have it easy either. He was practically roaring as he said these words. When the onlookers heard this, they were stunned at first, then their expressions changed as if they remembered something. They gasped and said, Qianji Martial Saint of Qianji Island? And Lady Ten of the Shady Sifting Gate? Fellow Taoist Qianji, fellow Taoist Ten Paths, the Grand Taoist Venerate in the distance immediately said, As long as you're willing to help us kill this brat, we'll definitely reward you handsomely after this. My Moon sect is the same. The Moon Patriarch immediately expressed his stance. Clearly, he was desperate. And my Valley God sect, in an instant, the Grand Taoist Venerate, the Emperor of Dali, the Moon Patriarch, the Valley God Patriarch, and the Green Dragon Goddess, who were attacking Yi Chen, expressed their stance one after another. As you wish. Two voices slowly came from the void. Then, endless black fog suddenly appeared in the void, and two figures slowly walked out of the black fog. One of them was a middle-aged man with a bare upper body. He looked like an ordinary person, and there were mysterious runes imprinted on his chest. The other person was a charming woman in black. She grabbed a soul from the black fog and swallowed it. Then, she looked straight at Yi Chen with green eyes. It's really the Patriarch of Qianji and Lady Ten-Yin. Someone among the onlookers blurted out. What followed was a deathly silence and shock. Including the two of them, there were 7 martial saints who wanted to kill Yi Chen. Excluding the Valley God Patriarch, who was being held back by Grand Tutor Ning, there were 6 martial saints attacking Yi Chen together. Grand Tutor Ning's expression was extremely cold. Qianji, Lady Ten-Yin, the two of you didn't stay in the West Ocean. How dare you come to the East Ocean? His heart sank to the bottom of the abyss. 6 martial saints were here. This included almost all the top powerhouses in the Tianfeng Sea area. The Patriarch of Qianji smiled arrogantly. Grand Tutor Ning, you heard it too. We only appeared because we were invited by fellow Shang, fellow Tai Yi and the rest. It's fine if you want us to help. After this is done, our shady sect will have one more elder in the Tianfeng Sea Area Alliance. Lady Ten-Yin looked at the Grand Taoist Venerate and went straight to the point. Sure. The Grand Taoist Venerate nodded. Lady Ten-Yin nodded in satisfaction. She then looked at Yi Chen and said while smiling, Little brother, you saw it too. The benefits they're offering are tempting enough. I won't hold back. Attack. Taoist Master Qianji's eyes turned cold as he waved his hand. 1,000 chance umbrella floated above his head like a war machine that harvested lives. Kill. The Grand Taoist Venerate and the rest attacked at the same time. The Emperor of Dali roared, Lady Ten-Yin, this guy's mistress has run away with his daughter. Please capture them. I like this mission. It's just capturing 2 little girls. It's a piece of cake. Lady Ten-Yin smiled coquettishly and chased after Mu Kaiwei and the rest who had been teleported by Yi Chen. How dare you? Yi Chen shouted. Coldness surged into the sky as killing intent exploded in his cold eyes. Golden light flickered on his body as he chased after them. You're facing the siege of 6 martial saints and you're about to die, yet you still want to save them? The Emperor of Dali, Shang Wudao, smirked coldly. In the next moment, the 6 of them attacked fearlessly and surrounded him. Suppress. The Patriarch of Qianji's face was ferocious as a terrifying palm print condensed in his hand. It was like a ferocious beast pouncing on Yi Chen with a terrifying airwave. You're courting death. Roar. Yi Chen threw a punch with all his might. He punched out and broke the Patriarch of Qianji's palm print directly, smashing his right arm. Mad Southern Yi die. The Emperor of Dali, Shang Wudao's dragon robe fluttered in the wind. The airwave directly tore the space beneath his feet as he threw another Emperor's killer fist. The other 3 attacked one after another. One of them brandished a sword. It was a high-grade spirit treasure. As soon as he swung it, wind and thunder resounded. Someone condensed a Dao seal. The Dao seal covered the space, erupting with terrifying mysterious energy that shook the clouds. End of this chapter. Chapter 1151. Run. On a mountain 30 kilometers away from where Yi Chen and the rest were fighting, Mu Kaiwei carried Meng Meng and pulled Jier with one hand as she dashed towards the capital's city gate with all her might. There was only one thought in her mind. That was to escape. She was not afraid of death, but she was afraid that the little girl in her arms would fall into the enemy's hands. If that was the case, she would not be able to face Yi Chen even if she died. Where do you think you're going? A martial arts grandmaster of the Dali dynasty leaped over and charged at her in a frenzy, without saying a word. Die. Mu Kaiwei opened her mouth and spat out a snow-white sword that looked like a cicada's wing tore through the air and slashed it down. Her thunderous methods immediately deterred many people who wanted to attack. Only then did they realize that this woman was not as simple as they had imagined. Girl, stay here. A martial king finally could not help but attack. His eyes shot out a huge hand that could hold up the sky and grabbed at Mu Kaiwei. Young mistress. Jier was in despair. Go quickly. Don't worry about me. I'll only drag you down, Although she had received the cultivation method from Yi Chen, she was not as hard-working as Mu Kaiwei in cultivation. She was only at the late-stage foundation building stage at the moment, and her combat strength was on par with a martial venerable. Mu Kaiwei took a deep breath in and handed the little girl in her arms to Jiro. She gritted her teeth and looked at the approaching hand with determination. "Go, I'll cover the back." "No," Jiro cried. "Go." Mu Kaiwei berated sternly. "Don't even think about leaving." Just when the hand was less than 10 feet away from the two girls, a huge scroll suddenly appeared in the air and blocked the hand. "Zhao Xing, you're a martial king after all. Now that you disregard your status and attack two weak women, do you still have any shame?" As the void trembled, an old man in Confucian robes appeared in front of Mu Kaiwei. The old man's entire body was filled with the aura of a scholar. Behind him, a sinister old man dressed in black appeared. His expression was extremely ugly. "Chancellor of the Directorate, Wei Fenyan, as a subject of the Great Li dynasty, are you going to help the evildoer now? I've already voluntarily resigned from the position of Chancellor of the Imperial College. Now, I'm just a scholar and a disciple of the Grand Preceptor." Wei Fengyan's expression was indifferent. He then said to Mu Kaiwei and the others, "Miss Mu, you can leave. The city gate official is my son-in-law. He will let you out of the city." "Many thanks, Teacher Wei." Mu Kaiwei was extremely grateful. Wei Fengyan was the Chancellor of the Imperial College, and the reason why he was helping her now was entirely because of Grand Preceptor Ning. With that, she led Jiu towards the city gate. "Ha ha ha, where do you think you're going?" At this moment, a bone-numbing and gloomy laughter came from the void, and then a black-clothed woman stood in front of Mu Kaiwei. Lady Ten-in. Wei Fengyan's expression changed greatly. Mu Kaiwei was in complete despair. Martial Saint. A martial saint personally came out to stop them. Lady Ten-in giggled. "Little sister, can you come with big sister? I won't hurt you." Mu Kaiwei retreated step by step with Meng Meng in her arms. Her face was filled with despair and a bitter smile. "Come with me." Lady Ten-in reached out to grab the former. "Hey, who dares to bully my teacher?" At this critical moment, a black shadow suddenly attacked from the space beside Lady Ten-in. It was a hoof. That hoof smashed down on Lady Ten-yin's face, sending her flying. Then, a donkey was revealed, an extremely thin and weak little donkey that seemed like it could even be blown away by a gust of wind. Lady Ten-in was dumbfounded. The onlookers were also dumbfounded. Before she could react, she saw the donkey carrying Mu Kaiwei and the other two. With a whoosh, it turned into a gust of wind and flew towards the city gate at an extremely fast speed. Someone gulped and said, That was a donkey? Am I seeing things?" "It should be," another person nodded with a dazed expression. Lady Ten-yin's face had almost been disfigured by a donkey's kick. Only Wei Fengyan revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. "It's Lord Shao Tong. I didn't expect it to be a martial saint." Rumble. At the scene of the battle, boulders rolled and mountains exploded. This earth-shattering battle had already reached its most tragic state. Roar. Yi Chen, who had transformed into the primordial demon ape, was tightly entangled by the 5 martial saints. He let out a furious roar, causing the mountains and the ground to tremble. Even with the protection of the formation, an endless amount of dust was swept up by the waves. "Get lost." Yi Chen's fist intent was invincible. He swung both fists and landed heavily on the chest of the Dali Emperor, Shang Wudao, when the 5 people's monstrous attacks landed on him. He didn't need to use any divine abilities or spells, because his body was his greatest asset and his most powerful weapon. Shang Wudao screamed and retreated continuously because half of his body was almost smashed by Yi Chen's punch. He felt slightly regretful as he looked at Yi Chen, who was in a berserk state like an ancient ferocious beast. It was because Yi Chen kept chasing after him despite being besieged by so many people. It was as if he would not stop until he was dead. If this continued, some of the people present would probably die. Thinking to this point, he could not help but place his hopes on Lady Ten Eans. He could tell that Yi Chen cared a lot about his daughter. Once Lady Ten Eans captured Yi Chen's daughter, their situation would improve greatly. At this moment, a streak of black energy swept over from the horizon, revealing Lady Ten Eans's figure. However, she was empty-handed. Shang Wudao's expression changed slightly. Ten Eans, where are they? They ran away. Lady Ten Eans's expression was extremely cold. She did not explain the exact process, but her expression was extremely gloomy. What? Shang Wudao was infuriated. You're a martial saint, yet you can't catch 3 ants? On the other hand, Yi Chen made up his mind when he heard that. Monstrous murderous aura swept through the sky in his terrifying blood-red eyes. All of you will die today. Boom! He took a step forward and his fists shook the void, carrying a monstrous murderous aura as he charged at the patriarch of Qianji who was closest to him. Qianji Divine Dao. The patriarch of Qianji's expression changed slightly as he shouted hurriedly. He activated his cultivation base with all his might and activated the spirit treasure, the 1,000 chance umbrella, above his head. He wanted to activate supreme killing intent and kill Yi Chen completely. Tens of thousands of rays of light bloomed from the 1,000 chance umbrella. They shot at Yi Chen like tens of thousands of arrows. Yi Chen's golden hair stood on end. He roared and advanced instead of retreating. His fists seemed like they were going to shatter the world. Thousands of rays of Qianji divine light struck Yi Chen's body. Although they pierced through Yi Chen's body, his wounds were healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. This showed how terrifying Yi Chen's physical body was. Not only could such a method not stop Yi Chen, but it also completely triggered his ferocity. He became more and more courageous as he fought. He was determined to kill the patriarch of Qianji. End of this chapter. Chapter 1152. Save fellow Qianji. Dao Master Tai and the rest roared furiously. They unleashed their trump cards, holding high-grade spirit treasures and forming terrifying palm prints to attack Yi Chen. Even Lady Ten Ean was no exception. This battle was extremely intense. It was unprecedented in the history of the Tianfeng Sea area. Everyone was fighting with their lives on the line. There was no chance at all. In the distance, everyone who had been watching the battle had goosebumps. They were clearly completely shocked. It would not be an exaggeration to describe Yi Chen as a genius to be able to force the 6 martial saints to such a state. However, this was still a fatal situation. Although Yi Chen's combat ability was extremely powerful, there would always be a moment when he was exhausted. How could he withstand the siege of 6 martial saints? Rumble, finally, the patriarch of Qianji's 1,000 chance umbrella was crushed by Yi Chen's fists. Yi Chen punched through the patriarch of Qianji's body while being attacked by the 5 of them from behind, crushing his soul directly. The patriarch of Qianji was dead. This was the first martial saint to die in this battle. Even so, his body was already riddled with holes. Even though his powerful physical body was rapidly recovering, the old wounds had yet to heal, and new ones were added to his body. A rain of blood was falling from the sky, as if the heavens were mourning the death of a saint and sending down a strange phenomenon. Everyone's hearts were twitching. Despite being besieged by 6 martial saints, Yi Chen still managed to kill one of them. This was simply too terrifying. The expressions of Dao Master Tai and the rest finally changed. To be precise, they were shocked. He won't be able to hold on for long. Shang Wudao, the Emperor of Dali, roared. He was really panicking. If Yi Chen did not die in this battle, he would definitely be a nightmare for the Dali dynasty in the future. Kill, kill, kill. He formed a seal with both hands and forcefully extracted all the dragon veins in the capital of Dali, gathering them into his body. Everyone saw countless golden dragon energy shooting over from all directions and fusing into his body. His aura became more and more powerful. Today, I'll fight you with the destiny of a country. Mad Southern Yi, you can't beat us. You must die. Shang Wudao was going all out. Kill! The patriarch of Wang Yue's sleeves fluttered. Suddenly, a beam of divine light shot out. It tore through the air and landed on Yi Chen like a bolt from the blue. It immediately left a palm-wide wound on Yi Chen's chest. It was a shocking sight. However, Yi Chen did not even frown. He moved his fists and arrived before the patriarch of Wang Yue in one step. Not good, stop him. A horsetail whisk appeared in his hand. The horsetail whisk grew in the wind and turned into countless white threads that wrapped around Yi Chen in an attempt to make him stay. Flood Dragon Bone! The green dragon goddess revealed madness on her face. She forcefully took out a dragon bone from her body and turned it into a sharp spear that shot at Yi Chen. Pfft! The dragon's bone pierced through Yi Chen's back directly, revealing his white bones. Blood splattered, but it still could not stop him. Roar! He let out a long roar, and his ferocious nature erupted. The golden primordial demonic ape's body expanded by another 3 meters. His golden fists were burning, turning into fist shadows that filled the sky and shook the heavens. With a rumble, the mountain collapsed. Blurg, when one of the fist shadows landed on the patriarch of Wang Yue's body, he immediately spat a mouthful of blood and was severely injured. Countless bones in his body were broken, and scarlet blood splattered into the sky. He controlled his body and wanted to retreat. Immediately after, another fist shadow blasted over. The patriarch of Wang Yue, who was already severely injured, widened his eyes, and his head was shattered on the spot. Even so, his tenacious life force still allowed a new head to grow. Yi Chen's eyes were filled with violent killing intent. He pounced on him and grabbed him before his head had completely grown out. He roared and raised his hands above his head. He pulled with all his might, and a large amount of blood instantly filled the sky. The patriarch of Wang Yue's body was torn into 2. His soul left his body as if it wanted to escape. However, Yi Chen opened his mouth and swallowed it. The patriarch of Wang Yue was dead, and his soul was destroyed. At this moment, everyone was extremely shocked. The scene before them was simply too brutal. Tearing a martial saint apart with his bare hands and devouring his soul. How was this a human? He was clearly a ferocious beast. The expressions of the remaining Taoist master, the Green Dragon Holy Mother, Lady Tenyin, the Emperor of Dali, and the rest changed drastically. They could not help but feel a chill in their hearts. I won't interfere in this matter anymore. Mad Southern Yi, I'll leave now. Lady Tenyin's expression changed a few times. After saying that, she rode a black fog and flew into the distance. She was really afraid. The 6 martial saints had joined forces. Apart from the 5 of them who were Second Revolution martial saints, there was also the Taoist master, a Third Revolution martial saint. With such combat power, even a 4th Revolution martial saint or a 5th Revolution martial saint would die. However, Yi Chen still killed 2 of them. While her departure caused an uproar, it also caused the expressions of the 3 of them to turn uglier. The 6 martial saints were no match for Yi Chen even if they joined forces, let alone the 3 of them who were left. Mad Southern Yi, even if I die, I'll drag you down with me. The Green Dragon Holy Mother's eyes were bloodshot. She then controlled her gigantic body to charge at Yi Chen. She tried to use her gigantic body to suppress Yi Chen. However, under her terrified gaze, Yi Chen's body doubled in size again. He was like a giant ape that could hold up the sky. Bang! Yi Chen took a few steps back after taking the heavy blow. Before the former could react, he grabbed her gigantic body with both hands. At the next moment, he opened his bloody mouth, and as his ferocious fangs appeared, he pierced into the former's body and sucked her blood crazily. No. She struggled frantically, trying to break free. However, it was futile. She could only watch as the energy in her body rapidly dissipated. Holy Mother! The Taoist master's heart ached. Madness appeared in his eyes as he chose to sacrifice his lifespan and burn the life force in his body. God-destroying spear. At that moment, he chose to use the forbidden secret technique of the Grand One sect with all his might. His body turned into a blood-colored spear that tore through space and pierced into Yi Chen's head. Lunatic, they're all lunatics, Shang Wudao roared. Roar. Almost half of the blood-colored spear pierced into Yi Chen's head, nailing his body heavily and sending him flying. Ha ha ha, die. Let's die together. The god-destroying spear that the Taoist master had transformed into laughed maniacally as he tried to destroy Yi Chen's soul. However, at the next moment, his tone changed abruptly as he said in a trembling voice, "Why you don't have the Shenting acupoint?" The so-called Shenting acupoint was where the souls of martial artists and spell masters resided. Once the Shenting acupoint was broken, the soul would be broken as well. However, he did not know that Yi Chen was not a martial artist or a spell master, but an immortal cultivator. The place where an immortal cultivator's divine consciousness was stored was called the Sea of Consciousness or the Naiwan Palace. It was not the same place as the Shenting acupoint. End of this chapter. Chapter 1154. Impossible, this is impossible. The blood-colored spear that the Grand One Tao Venerable had transformed into roared crazily. The forbidden secret technique that he had risked his life to unleash was useless against Yi Chen. How could he not be hysterical? Yi Chen's eyes were bloodshot. He turned around abruptly and broke the blood-colored spear. Along with it, the Grand One Tao Venerable's soul was shattered. Si Xing, the green dragon goddess, who was on the verge of death, cried bitterly after witnessing everything. She was filled with regret and guilt. She could not help but recall the time when the Grand One Tao Venerable was still a child of the Grand One sect, and met her in the sea. At that time she was just a little dragon. However, it was this meeting that caused the two of them to have feelings for each other. In the end, they ignored everyone's objections and got together. They even gave birth to young Master Yaoyue. Due to the different ideals of humans and demons, she and the Grand One Tao Venerable had many conflicts in the future. In the end, they fell out and became enemies. They did not interact for hundreds of years. Ah! She roared crazily. Rumble, she chose to self-destruct directly. Instantly, it was like a nuclear bomb had exploded. Surging energy waves swept out in all directions. Yi Chen spat a mouthful of blood under such a commotion. His body was sent flying heavily. Wherever the terrifying energy wave passed, everything turned into dust. Even the space was blasted through. The world suddenly became deathly silent. Countless onlookers were shocked, but they were silent. They did not know how to describe their feelings. Before this, the 6 martial saints besieged Yi Chen. Everyone thought that there would be no suspense. However, the real outcome was that the 5 martial saints died in Yi Chen's hands. After the smoke and dust dispersed, Shang Wudao spat a mouthful of blood. Shang Wudao spat out a mouthful of blood and looked around with a pale face. He suddenly burst into laughter and said, "Dead, you're finally dead." Grand Tutor Ning and the Patriarch of Valley God, who were affected by the storm, were also pale. Their eyes were filled with fear. "Is he dead?" Grand Tutor Ning smiled bitterly. However, at that moment the sunken ground suddenly trembled, and then a tall figure rose from the ground. The figure was covered in wounds and scabs, especially the bloody hole between his brows. One could even see the white bone. It was a ghastly sight. Whoosh! The silent heaven and earth suddenly burst into an uproar. The smile on Shang Wudao's face froze and his eyes were filled with shock. "He's not dead? How is this possible?" Putting aside the fact that the 6 of them had besieged Yi Chen and injured him, the power of the Green Dragon Goddess's self-destruction alone was enough to kill any martial saint. However, Yi Chen was not dead? Cough, cough, cough. Yi Chen spoke slowly as he coughed violently. His voice was extremely hoarse. I'm not dead. Are you disappointed? As he finished speaking, he took a heavy step forward. Even though this step was extremely difficult, it made Shang Wudao feel even more pressured. Both of them were injured. Although Yi Chen's injuries seemed more severe, Shang Wudao still did not dare to attack. Fellow Taoist Gu, kill him! Shang Wudao roared. The Patriarch of Grains did not move. He admitted that he wanted to kill Yi Chen before, but after witnessing the brutality of the battle, he did not dare to do so anymore. Even if he wanted to make a move, Grand Tutor Ning, who was in front of him, wouldn't sit back and watch. No one can save you now. Yi Chen dragged his heavy footsteps toward the former. He would cough blood with every step he took. His injuries were too severe. The combat strength of the 6 martial saints was equivalent to that of a perfected nascent soul realm cultivator. Although he had devoured the 2 minds of the Great Li dynasty and increased his cultivation to late nascent soul realm, he was still able to unleash his power with the help of the ancient demonic ape. But he was still heavily injured. Shang Wudao retreated repeatedly. His expression changed several times, and then a look of determination flashed in his eyes. A jade talisman suddenly appeared in his hand. The moment he saw the jade talisman, Grand Tutor Ning's expression changed. This is the Emperor's throne treasure talisman of the Great Yin dynasty in the Middle State? There were countless countries in the ancient barren world. These countries were also divided into different levels. Dynasties, emperor dynasties. Whether it was the Great Dynasties or the Dali dynasty, they were all dynasties, but in the Central Plains there was an imperial dynasty. The so-called Emperor dynasty was a country with an emperor realm expert. They were the true masters of this world. Not good. Thinking to this point, Grand Tutor Ning hurriedly said, "Fellow Yi, run quickly. He's going to summon an emperor realm expert." He had been with Shang Wudao for 1,000 years. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that the former would be in contact with the Great Yin dynasty in the Middle State behind his back. Ha ha ha, it's too late, too late. Shang Wudao laughed maniacally and suddenly crushed the jade talisman in his hand. Mad Southern Yi, this is the trap I set up. I used you to help me eliminate Dao Master Tai and the rest. I have to say, I'm very satisfied with you. Almost at the same time he crushed the jade talisman, the originally silent sky suddenly changed color, and the wind and clouds surged. Rumble! In front of everyone's eyes, a huge hand as heavy as a mountain stretched out from the void. One palm. Yi Chen was slapped into the void rift with just one palm. Even though his body was huge, he could not resist the palm at all. The sky gradually brightened and the hand dissipated. However, Yi Chen was nowhere to be seen. Only a gigantic void rift that looked like a natural chasm appeared in this world. A terrifying spatial storm came from it. Ha ha ha! Shang Wudao's wild laughter resounded through the world. Only I am the one who laughs in the end. Everyone fell silent, immersed in the huge hand from before. Just what kind of existence could possess such power to pierce through space with a single palm strike? No one thought that Yi Chen could still be alive. Even if that terrifying palm could not kill him, he could not survive the spatial storm. Grand Tutor Ning staggered and looked silently at Shang Wudao, who was laughing maniacally. A trace of sorrow and lethargy surged, as if he had aged dozens of years in an instant. You're really terrifying, Grand Tutor. Are you satisfied with my performance? Shang Wudao looked at him like a victor looking down at a loser. Grand Tutor Ning's lips moved slightly. If I'm not wrong, you're in contact with the Great Yin dynasty, right? How did you obtain an Emperor's Throne Powerhouse's talisman treasure? Shang Wudao slowly walked to his side and laughed sinisterly in a low voice, because after the ghost ship appeared a year ago, it was the Great Yin dynasty who contacted me. This Emperor's Throne Talisman treasure is also the reward the Great Yin dynasty gave me for participating in the encirclement of the Great Qin dynasty's old subordinates. Shang Wudao was proud. Blurg! Grand Tutor Ning spat a mouthful of blood and walked into the distance while trembling. His figure was extremely lonely. Shang Wudao watched him leave quietly with a gloomy gaze. Grand Tutor, on account of our 1,000 years of friendship, I won't kill you. I'll give you 3 days to leave the Great Li dynasty. End of this chapter. Chapter 1155. On that very day, a piece of shocking news spread throughout the entire Tianfeng Sea area, centered around the Dali dynasty. Mad Southern Yi and the Great Li dynasty fought against the Grand One's supremacy, the Green Dragon Holy Mother, the Moonwatch Patriarch, the Patriarch of Qianji, the Emperor of Dali, and the Lady of Tenin. This was the result of an unprecedented and shocking battle. 4 martial saints had been killed by Yi Chen. Only Lady Tenin, Dali dynasty's Emperor Shang Wudao, and the Patriarch of the Valley Goddess sect survived. In the end, it was the Emperor of Dali who used his great divinity to summon an Emperor's throne powerhouse to kill Mad Southern Yi. When the news spread, the Tai sect, the Moon Clan, the Green Dragon Clan, and the other forces were in despair. The other forces were all shocked. They were shocked by Yi Chen's terrifying battle prowess and shocked by the Emperor of Dali's methods. A strong practitioner of the Emperor's throne. In the entire Tianfeng Sea region, there had never been such a person. Only the faraway Middle Continent had his legend. However, the Emperor of Dali actually had such means. At that moment, the Dali dynasty sent out an army, led by the Emperor of Dali himself. They first swept across the East Sea, then the South Sea, the North Sea, and the West Sea. The Yinluo sect's martial saint, Lady Tenin, and the old ancestor of the Valley God sect surrendered. Following that was the Greater One sect, Moon sect, and other forces. Anyone could tell that Shang Wudao, the emperor of the Great Li dynasty, had finally revealed his wild ambition after the fall of such a top-notch expert in the Tianfeng Sea area, to unify the Tianfeng Sea area. However, so long as one chose to resist, all of them perished or had their sects and clans annihilated. For a time, a horrifying and bloody suppression arose in the entire Tianfeng Sea area. Tianfeng City, King Mu Fort. When Mu Kaiwei and the rest, who had escaped, heard about Yi Chen's death, they were overwhelmed with grief and fainted several times. Only Meng Meng, who was kept in the dark, was clamoring to find her father. Mu Kaiwei had to tell her that her father had gone to a faraway place, and would only be back after a while. And it was on the 3rd day that Dali dynasty realized its ambition, unifying the Tianfeng Sea area and sending troops to Tianfeng City. It was surrounded by millions of soldiers. The King Mu Fort was merely a grade 7 sect, and it was in a precarious position amidst such a great momentum and endless killing intent. Just as the million-strong army approached the city, and the entire King Mu Fort fell into despair, a woman with an ethereal aura and a white veil on her face suddenly descended onto Tianfeng City. The powerhouses of the King Mu Fort looked as if they were facing a great enemy. Mu Kaiwei hugged the little girl and said in despair, "Are you here to kill me too?" "Ha ha ha," the woman covered her mouth and laughed. Her beautiful eyes landed on Mu Kaiwei. "On the contrary, I'm here to save you." "Save me?" The vigilance in Mu Kaiwei's eyes intensified. "Who are you? Why did you save me?" The woman smiled faintly and said, "I come from the Middle Continent, the Jade Lake Sacred Ground. Your constitution and temperament are suitable to become a disciple of my Jade Lake Sacred Ground." Jade Lake Sacred Ground? Everyone looked confused. Obviously, they had never heard of it. Mu Kaiwei bit her lip and said, "How is it compared to the Dali dynasty?" "Dali dynasty?" The woman smiled mockingly as if she was disdainful. "A piece of trash like the Dali Emperor doesn't even have the right to guard the door in my Jade Lake Sacred Ground. If you agree, I can help you resolve this crisis today." As soon as she said that, the King Mu Fort's camp was in an uproar. Clearly, they did not expect the other party to have such a powerful background. "As long as you help me destroy the Dali dynasty, I'm willing to go with you," Mu Kaiwei said weakly. "That's impossible." The woman refused decisively. although the Dali dynasty is nothing in the eyes of the Jade Lake Sacred Ground, it's backed by the Great Een Imperial Dynasty. If the Dali dynasty is destroyed, the Great Een Imperial Dynasty won't sit idly by. At this point, she seemed to be worried that Mu Kaiwei would refuse, so she added, however, if you follow me back to the sect, I can guarantee you that in less than 3 years, you'll be able to personally destroy the Dali dynasty. Mu Kaiwei still did not say anything. After hesitating for a few seconds, she looked at the little girl in her arms and said, "Can I bring her with me?" "No." The woman rejected instinctively. Then, she pointed a finger at the little girl's forehead, and a strand of true dragon chi shot out from the little girl's forehead. The strand of true dragon chi soared into the air and suddenly turned into a golden dragon that coiled in the air, roaring endlessly. In that instant, a gleam of light flashed through the woman's eyes, and she immediately changed her mind. She can go with you, and she'll be personally taught by an Emperor's throne expert. All right, I agree. Only then did Mu Kaiwei let out a sigh of relief. Beside her, Jiu grabbed the corner of her clothes tightly, her face filled with reluctance. "Young mistress, I can't bear to part with you. Little girl, come with me." A streak of light flashed through the air, and then an old man in cloth clothes arrived instantly. He studied Jiu lovingly. "I'm from the Radiant Saint Hall." Jiu's eyes lit up and then they dimmed. She said with reddened eyes, "But I don't want to be separated from young mistress." Ha ha. The old man was immediately caught between laughter and tears. "Only by returning with me will you have the chance to meet your young mistress in the future. Otherwise, the gap between you and your young mistress will only grow greater and greater." "Is that so?" Only then did Jiu wipe away her tears. Her mood lightened up and she said, "Grandpa, I'll go with you." She glanced at the army gathered below the city walls and said slyly, "But you have to help me kill them." "All right." The old man and the woman looked at each other. The two of them charged off, and in a single moment, the army was annihilated. The capital of Dali. It was the same tattered donkey cart, the same skinny donkey, and the same blind old man. The Grand Preceptor Ning sat in the donkey cart with a scripture in his hand, allowing the cart to shake. The two sides of the streets were filled with all the scholars and scholars of the Dali Empire. All of them watched the donkey cart leave silently. In the end, a scholarly man emerged. He stopped the donkey cart and bowed solemnly. "Grand Preceptor, I'm willing to leave with you." The donkey cart slowly stopped. The Grand Preceptor Ning lifted the curtains and looked at the scholarly man outside. "I'm no longer the Grand Preceptor of Dali, but you're still our teacher and teacher." The scholarly man bowed heavily. He was extremely determined. Rumble! Suddenly, countless students knelt down on both sides of the street and said in unison, "Teacher, we're willing to leave with you." Grand Preceptor Ning watched this scene silently. His gaze swept across every young face, and tears welled up in his eyes. "From now on, there will be no more scholars in Dali. Now that I've unified the Tianfeng Sea area, I'd like to see who dares to kill my army of 1,000,000. In the palace, the infuriated Shang Wudao smashed a beloved treasure. "Lady Ten-Yin, go and destroy the King Mu fort now." Lady Ten-Yin was about to move when she suddenly realized that a terrifying pressure had descended on her surroundings, causing her to be unable to move. Even the Dali Empire's emperor, Shang Wudao, was no exception. Under their shocked gazes, a barefooted woman in snow-white clothes slowly walked over. Her indifferent voice sounded, "Mu Kaiwei is already a disciple of the Jade Lake Sacred Land. If you touch the King Mu fort, the Great Een Imperial Dynasty won't be able to protect you." In the turbulent southern region, Ying Wei, who was dressed in a black dragon robe, sat upright on a throne that was stained with blood. Beneath him, Qin Jian, who was wrapped in blood, knelt on one knee. "Master, there's news from the Tianfeng Sea area. Mad Southern Yi fought 6 martial saints, but in the end, he was killed by the Emperor's throne talisman summoned by the Dali Empire's Emperor, an Emperor's throne powerhouse?" Ying Wei did not move, and his deep eyes did not change at all. A mere emperor's throne powerhouse can't even kill me, so how can he kill mad Southern Yi? Just you wait. Whether it's the Dali Empire or the Great Een behind it, the day of destruction is not far away. In the eastern wilderness, the oldest ancient clan, the Shi family. Shi Qianhan stood at the top of the pavilion and raised his eyes to look in the direction of the Tianfeng Sea area. He muttered, "Brother Yi, I don't believe that you're dead. I'm now the Shi family's young ancestor, and I'll set off for the Middle Continent to search for the ancient ancestors' remains. I'll wait for you in the Middle Continent." In the eastern wilderness, as one of the three overlords, the entire Ahuang nation was made up of women. There was not a single man. Even the ruler of the Ahuang nation was a woman. In the luxurious bedroom of the Empress, the peerlessly beautiful Empress stood barefooted in front of the window without a shred of clothing on her body. The Empress looked at the information in her hands and muttered. He fought against 6 martial saints alone, killed 4 of them, and finally forced an emperor's throne powerhouse to make a move. Interesting. What's interesting? Let me see. At that moment, as the curtain was lifted, a naked man walked out. He hugged the Empress from behind and chuckled. The Empress immediately revealed a shy expression. Her body softened, and she passed the information in her hands to the man behind her. If outsiders saw this scene, they would definitely be shocked speechless. The dignified Empress of a nation actually went against the ancestral teachings and hid a man in her bedroom. As the man looked at the information, the Empress snuggled into the man's arms like a little bird and said gently, "Ah Quan, the technique you taught Yunyuan last night was really magical." Slut scrammed to the side, however, the man pushed her away forcefully. "What's wrong?" The Empress' expression changed slightly. Obviously, she did not expect the man who usually doted on her to lose his composure like that. "What's wrong? What's wrong?" The Patriarch of Hell's eyes were fierce. "My brother was bullied. What do you think?" "You mean?" The Empress was stunned at first, then she seemed to recall something. She had an incredulous expression on her face and said coldly, "Do you need my help? Our Empress Kingdom has a teleportation formation that connects directly to the Tianfeng Sea area. It can gather 5 million troops in half a day. No need. Just teach the Great Li a lesson. For example, we can destroy 8 to 10 of their sections." The Patriarch immediately laughed. "With little Ye's methods, how can a so-called Emperor's throne powerhouse kill him? I'll continue to wait for him in this gentle place." Although he said that, the coldness in his eyes became more intense. The Great Li's Emperor Shang Wudao? Great Een Imperial Dynasty? Emperor's throne powerhouse? I'm not done with you. P.S. Chapter 5. Happy Lantern Festival, everyone. End of this chapter. Chapter 1156. Central Province. It was almost dusk in a sparsely populated area. In the middle of the desolate mountain, the shrubs were overgrown and the weeds were about half a person's height. It was summer, and thumb-sized mosquitoes were flying everywhere in the forest. Following a slight crisp sound, a faint murmur came from the forest. "Steward Wu, are you sure that evil beast will really pass by here?" Moving one's line of sight closer, one could see that there were more than a dozen people hiding in the forest near the stream, staring intently at the stream below. These people were all men. Whether it was their attire or appearance, they were all very simple, like ordinary villagers. However, each of them was holding weapons such as knives, forks, bows, and arrows. The one who spoke was a strong man. Because he was wearing a short-sleeved shirt, his thick arms had already been bitten by the mosquitoes in the mountains, and there were many red lumps. The one called Steward Wu was an old man in a green robe and a silk scarf on his head. This person obviously had a high status among the dozen people. "Lower your voice." Steward Wu made a shushing gesture and said to the strong man, "Tian Peng, why would I lie to you? Every day at dusk, that evil beast will come here to drink water, and it has never stopped. If you don't believe me, you can ask Li Liuji." The Li Liuji he spoke of was a middle-aged man with a thin body but a pair of piercing eyes. Li Liuji nodded repeatedly and said, "I can swear that I have observed it for a month. There's no mistake." Hearing this, the crowd completely suppressed the feeling of irritation in their hearts. After all, Li Liuji was a famous hunter in Dongzhang village. He could draw a stone bow without missing a single shot. A month ago, the village frequently lost people, and this matter even affected the county government. The village official, Zhang Yuanwei, had no choice but to investigate under pressure. The result was that there seemed to be a tiger in the mountain, and the culprit of all this was this tiger. Because of this, Zhang Yuanwei had no choice but to order Steward Wu to mobilize the strength of the entire village and offer a reward for killing this tiger. The strong man, Tianpeng, rolled his eyes and stared at Steward Wu. "Steward Wu, if we really kill that evil beast, will everyone get 10 taels of silver?" When these words were spoken, everyone couldn't help but look at Manager Wu with gazes filled with excitement. 1 tael of silver was equivalent to 2,000 copper coins. It could buy more than 300 caddies of rice. If it was 10 taels of silver, it would be 3,000 caddies of rice. It was enough to feed a family of 5 for a year. Of course. Steward Wu stroked his beard and said with a smile, "Our East Zhang village doesn't have a lot of people to begin with. If we continue to let this tiger bully us, we will be completely crippled. Don't worry, if you can kill this tiger, each of you will get 10 silver taels. The one who contributes the most will get 20 silver taels." Tianpeng was so excited that he rubbed his fists and palms together when he heard 20 taels of silver. He couldn't wait to rush out and start killing right now. At this moment, he noticed that a dark-skinned man beside him was silent. He couldn't help but ask, "Old Zhang, what are you spacing out for?" The one called Old Zhang was about 50 years old. He shouldn't have been in the tiger hunting brigade at this age, but because he was a famous blacksmith in the village, he had trained his arm strength, so he was allowed to join. After Old Zhang regained his senses, he gritted his teeth and said, "I'm thinking, after I get the reward this time, should I find a husband for my daughter? Look at your Cui Hua's burly and ferocious appearance, which man would dare to marry her?" Tianpeng muttered with a strange expression. Old Zhang's expression became angry. Just as he was about to reprimand him, he heard Li Liuji whisper, "Stop talking, there's movement." Everyone immediately fell silent. They followed Li Liuji's gaze and saw a faint shadow walking towards the stream from the end of the forest. When everyone saw it clearly, they realized that it was a giant tiger that was nearly 2 meters long. Its body was densely covered with colorful stripes. A spotted tiger, this beast is a spotted tiger. Li Liuji lowered his voice and said. So it's still a valuable evil creature, someone was shocked. Not long after, the spotted tiger walked to the stream and started drinking water. Obviously, it didn't notice the people in the forest. This is the time, kill! Taking advantage of the moment when the tiger lowered its head, Tianpeng shouted and rushed out with a chopping knife in hand. As he charged out, the remaining dozen or so people also swarmed out, as if they were infected by Tianpeng's morale. Whoosh! At this moment, a sharp arrow shot out from the forest, heading straight for the spotted tiger. Obviously, it was Li Liuji's attack. He didn't expect the arrow to kill the tiger because that would not happen. He only needed to injure it and make it lose too much blood. However, when his arrow, which had always hit its mark, was about to hit the tiger, a black wall suddenly appeared on the tiger's body and blocked the arrow. Shit! Li Liuji's expression suddenly changed. He hurriedly got up and roared, "This is a demonic tiger that has cultivated to a certain level. Tianpeng, quickly, come back!" They were all ordinary people. They might have a chance against a normal tiger, but if they were to go against a demonic tiger, they would definitely be unable to withstand a single blow. In fact, he wasn't the only one who saw the scene just now. Everyone else saw it too, but it was already too late for them to turn back. Roar! As a tiger's roar echoed through the forest, the spotted tiger suddenly turned around and opened its bloody mouth, directly swallowing Tian Ping, who was at the front. Crunch, crunch, with a series of chewing sounds, a living person disappeared in an instant. The rest of the people screamed crazily and pushed each other as they retreated. Ouch, my leg, my leg! In his panic, blacksmith old Zhang twisted his ankle and fell to the ground, trying to call for help from the others. However, how could they, who were in a state of panic and only wanted to escape, save him? Old Zhang could only tremble all over, looking at the spotted tiger with a face full of despair as it stretched its tail and approached him step by step. As if it had swallowed Tian Ping, it suddenly opened its mouth and directly bit at old Zhang. Old Zhang closed his eyes in despair. Bang! At this moment, old Zhang suddenly heard a loud noise, as if something had fallen from the sky. It was accompanied by the smell of blood. Oh my God, what is that? A person! The people who ran up the mountain looked back and saw a living person suddenly falling from the sky and smashing the spotted tiger to death. Old Zhang couldn't help but open his eyes and saw an incomparably bloody scene. The spotted tiger that looked like a demon was now lying on the ground, almost out of shape after being smashed. On top of it laid a bloody person. It seemed to be a man, but his eyes were closed. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. End of this chapter. Chapter 1157. Old Zhang was stunned for a moment. Suddenly, his body trembled and his pants became wet. He did not feel ashamed at all. There was only a strong feeling of surviving a disaster in his heart. It was as if he had just passed through the gates of hell. After an unknown amount of time, someone finally couldn't help but walk over. They surrounded the man on top of the tiger's carcass and began to discuss. It's really a person. This person is seriously injured. I don't know if he's dead or alive. This person seems to have fallen from the sky and smashed the tiger to death. He saved us. After old Zhang recovered with great difficulty, he pushed through the crowd and slowly walked over. He bent down and put his hand under the man's nose. He's not dead yet. He's still breathing, he said excitedly. The crowd immediately exclaimed, "He's still alive after such a serious injury. It's unbelievable, but looking at his injuries, I don't think he's going to survive. Why don't we just leave him alone?" someone said. The rest of the people immediately became silent. That's right. They were all poor commoners. Otherwise, they wouldn't have participated in the tiger hunt for 10 taels of silver. Bringing back such an injured person would cost a lot of money, not to mention food and drink. Steward Wu squeezed out from the crowd and said hesitantly, "This person's origin is unknown." "I think, no." Old Zhang suddenly interrupted him. "Steward Wu, don't forget. If it wasn't for this person, we would all be dead." The crowd became silent again. Steward Wu looked ashamed. "Steward Wu." Old Zhang's expression softened. "You said earlier that we will each get 10 taels of silver for killing the tiger. The one who contributed the most will get 20 taels. Does that still count?" "Yes, of course it does." Steward Wu nodded. "Good." Old Zhang said, "Tian Ping is dead. I don't want my 10 taels of silver anymore. Give Tian Ping's share and my share to his family. As for the 20 taels of silver, you have to treat this person's injury." When the others heard this, they all had a look of shame on their faces. Li Luji took over and said, "Give half of my 10 taels of silver to old Zhang. I will also give 5 taels of silver from my share to treat this little brother's injury. Whether he can survive or not depends on his luck. And me." The rest of the people spoke one after another. Dongzhang Village. A small village with a population of less than 500. Because the local people's surname was Zhang, it was named Dongzhang Village. Dang. 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 At the entrance of Zhang Ji's iron shop at the east end of the village, a plump woman was standing in the hot shed, waving the iron hammer in her hand to hit a piece of red-hot iron. At this time, a group of people surrounded old Zhang and hurriedly rushed into the house. Old Zhang was carrying a young man covered in blood on his back. The blacksmithing woman's expression changed slightly, and she immediately rushed into the house with the hammer in her hand. As soon as she entered the door, she shouted, "Father, you can't die. If you die, how can I live?" Halfway through her sentence, she stopped abruptly. She saw her father standing by the bed, alive and well, and a man covered in blood was lying on the bed. "Father, who is he?" The woman smiled bitterly. Old Zhang took out a dry towel and wiped the body of the person on the bed. "Cui Hua, go and get your grandpa in here. This is a matter of life and death." In just half a day, everyone in Dongzhang village knew about the process of hunting the tiger. When they found out that they had encountered a demonic tiger that had cultivated to its peak, everyone broke out in cold sweat. When they heard that a young man covered in blood fell from the sky and crushed the tiger to death, countless people were in disbelief. Some people didn't believe it. After all, they had never seen a person who fell from the sky and survived. Some said that the young man was actually an immortal that descended to the mortal world in an instant. Many people in the village rushed to Zhangji's smithy to see what the young man looked like. However, they were all stunned by old Zhang's daughter, Cui Hua. She took out a small stool and sat down at the door with a hammer in her hand. Inside the house, old Zhang had already cleaned the blood off the man. The only doctor in the village, Dr. Lin, wrapped the man like a dumpling with a white cloth. Old Zhang looked nervously at the old man in green who was carrying a medicine box. "Old Lin, how is it? Is there any hope? Did this person really fall from the sky?" Dr. Lin did not answer the question. "I'm not too sure." Old Zhang shook his head. "I was scared out of my wits. I didn't see it clearly at all. Just tell me if he can survive. This young man is seriously injured. I believe you saw it for yourself. His body is covered in wounds. Some of the wounds even penetrated his heart and lungs." Hearing this, old Zhang's face was also full of shock. When he took off the other party's clothes, he was also shocked. The densely packed wounds were like broken wine bottles. "I've been a doctor for decades, but this is the first time I've seen such a tenacious life force. Now we can only rely on his luck." Dr. Lin stroked his beard. After a moment of silence, he said, "I don't recommend that you save him. Even if he can be cured with such serious injuries, you can't imagine the cost. If it was someone else, I definitely wouldn't be so generous. But who asked him to save me?" Old Zhang gritted his teeth and said, "Although I'm an insignificant person, I also know that kindness must be repaid. At most, I'll sell the smithy." Dr. Lin left. From then on, Zhangji's smithy also closed. Old Zhang and his daughter Cui Hua almost never left the young man on the bed. The more they spent, the less their savings. The young man was still unconscious. The rumors about him in the village also gradually dispersed. Everyone felt that he would not live for much longer. "Who are you?" Cui Hua stayed by the bed, holding her chin with her hand. She quietly looked at the young man's facial features. Her gaze was very curious. The latter's handsome features made her blush. In the past few days, she was the one who changed the medicine and gauze for the young man, so she had seen his body thoroughly. When she saw the densely packed wounds on the young man's body, she, who had climbed trees to dig for bird eggs and beat up a group of naughty children until they cried, could not help but cry. "They all said that you fell from the sky. Is that true? How can you be so good-looking? Also, why do you have a head full of white hair at such a young age? What's your name? When are you going to wake up?" This kind of conversation happened frequently in the next few days. Sometimes it made old Zhang feel that his daughter, who couldn't get married, was possessed. On the 7th day, when Cui Hua went to Dr. Lin's house to get the last dose of topical medicine and returned home, she saw that the bed was empty. She subconsciously turned around and wanted to go out to look for it. She saw a completely naked young man standing at the door of her house. "Ah! Father, father, he's awake. Come quickly," an ear-piercing voice echoed within a radius of 100 meters. causing the chickens to fly and the dogs to jump. End of this chapter. Chapter 1158. In a simple and crude house, old Zhang and his daughter stared at the young man standing in front of them with their eyes wide open. At this moment, the young man had already changed into a set of incomparably clean robes that were full of patches. It seemed like his figure was a little tall and sturdy, causing the robes to seem a little tight. If one looked closely, the young man's eyes were lifeless. He was standing on the ground in a daze, holding a corn cob in his hands and gnawing on it. Slow down, there's still. Old Zhang was shocked by his table manners. He looked at his daughter helplessly. When did he wake up? I don't know either. Cui Hua shook her head repeatedly. Just now, when you were still forging, I went out to find Grandpa Lin to get the medicine. When I came back, I saw him getting out of bed. At this point, she felt her face was still a little hot, and her mind couldn't help but recall the previous scene. In order to conceal her abnormality, she immediately shook her head and discarded the distracting thoughts in her mind. She asked, Father, his body recovers very quickly. He was previously covered in injuries, but now he's completely healed. There's not even a scar left. Yeah, I'm curious too. Old Zhang could not figure it out either. Old Lin said that the medicinal herbs in the village are limited. The medicine he prescribed is only slightly better than normal medicine for bruises and injuries. Forget it, let's not think about it anymore. It's a good thing that he's alive. This way, I can also breathe a sigh of relief. Old Zhang shook his head and walked towards the young man who was wolfing down his food. He smiled and said, Young man, this old man's surname is Zhang. What's your name? However, the young man only raised his head and smiled at him before lowering his head again to gnaw on the cob in his hand. Maybe I was too presumptuous. Old Zhang didn't think too much about it. Thinking that the other party didn't want to tell him, he asked again, Can you tell me where your house is, so that we can contact your family? Hearing the word family, the young man's movement suddenly froze, and a blank look flashed across his empty eyes. Then, he threw away the corn cob in his hand that he had finished eating and shouted at old Zhang, Hungry? Hungry? My father is asking you. You only know how to eat. Cui Hua was so angry that she subconsciously took a few steps back. She was so scared that the young man took a few steps back. Then, she squatted on the ground and cried bitterly with her hands around her head. Sorry, I didn't mean to be mean to you. Cui Hua's heart softened. The young man picked up the dusty corn kernels that fell to the ground and threw them into his mouth. He looked very aggrieved. I'm scared. Cui Hua seemed to have thought of something. Pointing at her own head, she stammered, Father, he seems to have a problem here. Did he get a concussion? Old Zhang's expression changed slightly. Go, invite your Grandpa Lin over. Let him take a look. An hour later, Dr. Lin performed a variety of examinations on the young man, took his pulse, and interrogated him. Under the nervous gazes of old Zhang and his daughter, he stroked his beard and sighed. If he really fell from the sky, it's very likely that he got a concussion. Can he be saved? Cui Hua cried out in alarm. Dr. Lin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said, I'm just a doctor, not an immortal. In such a situation, unless you can invite the legendary Immortal Master, old Zhang was extremely disappointed. They were all ordinary people. Putting aside the fact that they had never seen an Immortal Master in their lives, even if they did, they didn't have the qualifications to invite them. As if sensing their feelings, Dr. Lin comforted them. Now we can only hope that he recovers on his own. But you don't have to be like this. Other than the fact that he can't remember the past and his IQ is stuck at a 5-year-old, he's very healthy. I'm worried about how to settle him. Old Zhang smiled bitterly. Although his IQ is the same as a 5-year-old, he's still an adult. An extra mouth, since you're the one who saved him, then you must bear all of this. Dr. Lin smiled as he picked up the medicine box and left. Since then, there was one more person in East Zhang village. Everyone knew that the young man who killed the tiger survived. It was said that he was quite handsome, but there seemed to be something wrong with his brain. Some people felt it was a pity, while others discussed. And Zhang Ji Iron Shop also had one more mouth to eat. No, it was 10 mouth. This was because old Zhang discovered that the young man's appetite was abnormally frightening. An ordinary person could eat 3 bowls of white rice, but the young man ate half a bucket in one meal. Fortunately, Butler Huang kept his promise and sent them money. Other than the 20 taels, there was also half of the money given to them by the tiger hunting squad, which added up to nearly 100 taels. Old Zhang was very clear that even if he had 100 taels of silver, sooner or later he would be broke if he just ate it all away. Left with no choice, he could only use the money he had to buy a few acres of land and 2 cows in the village. Zhang Ji Iron Shop reopened. The only thing that made old Zhang happy was that the young man he picked up was strong. An ordinary person could only carry a weight of 150 kilograms at a time, but the young man could carry 500 kilograms. From then on, Zhang Ji Iron Shop had an apprentice who could use a hammer. The farming tools he forged were very sharp, and in a short period of time, Zhang Ji Iron Shop's business was very good. They even sold their tools to neighboring villages. That was the 10th day that the young man came to East Zhang village. Old Zhang named him by Ziweng because of his white hair at such a young age. It was also on that day that the vast central plains underwent a shocking change. An imperial dynasty called the Great Qin was officially established, and a man called Ing became the ruler of the imperial dynasty. The entire southern region accepted Ing as the ruler, and the largest force in the central plains, the Demon region, chose to ally with Ing. The Great Qin dynasty entered the Central Plains, and the Central Plains officially fell into chaos. Many forces attacked the Great Qin, and the 100 Empire War officially began. In the Great Qin dynasty, a young man called the Black Dragon King crazily took revenge on the Great Yin dynasty and destroyed more than 10 subordinate forces of the Great Yin dynasty. A young man in white with an ancient sword on his back crossed the border and killed his way into the Tianfeng Sea area, causing the emperor of the Great Li, Shang Wudao, to flee in panic and causing 2 emperors' throne cultivators to fight. The Ahuang Kingdom of the Eastern Wilderness and the Shi family of the ancient clan sealed off the Tianfeng Sea area. The empress of the Great Li dynasty, Yun Yi, sealed off the Tianfeng Sea area and declared war on the Great Li dynasty. The Great Li dynasty was surrounded by enemies, and all these changes had no effect on East Zhang village. The people continued to live their lives of working at sunrise and resting at sunset. The only effect was that the Great Kuan dynasty, which East Zhang village belonged to, was also forced to participate in the war. There was a great conscription in the country, and every village was sent to every household. Even the young men of East Zhang village were no exception. The county government sent out troops to forcibly transfer them, and those who disobeyed were killed without mercy. Zhang Ji Iron Shop was also affected. As a young man, Bai Ziweng should have been exiled as well. However, the whole village testified that Bai Ziweng was a fool, and after old Zhang secretly gave the conscription officer 20 taels of silver, he was finally let off. Even so, Bai Ziweng joined the team of repairing the plank road with the village's elderly who could move. End of this chapter. Chapter 1159. Bai Ziweng, Big Blockhead, Big Rice Bucket. Bai Ziweng, Big Blockhead, Big Rice Bucket. Bai Ziweng, Big Blockhead, Big Rice Bucket. At the entrance of Zhang Ji's iron shop, a group of children were jumping and singing nursery rhymes while pointing at the dazed Bai Ziweng. Some people even threw rotten vegetable leaves at him. Bai Ziweng scratched his head and giggled. A group of little bastards scrammed for this old lady. At this time, a tall and sturdy woman holding a broom rushed out. She looked very fierce. The laughing and scolding group of children immediately scattered in fright. As they ran, they cursed, Zhang Chui Hua, female Yiksha, call Wawa. Little bastard, don't run. Chui Hua held the broom and chased after them. She was so angry that her whole body was trembling. When she returned to the entrance of her house, she saw the youth sitting at the entrance and giggling. She became angry and said, "You idiot, you can still laugh after being scolded." After she finished scolding him, she remembered why she was bickering with him. Her expression softened and she said, "Hungry? I'll go cook for you." Inside the house, there were 2 dishes and a soup on the table. There were 2 steamed buns in the bowl and half a bucket of rice. Seeing Bai Ziwang wolfing down his food, Cui Hua couldn't help but carefully wipe his mouth. She said, "Blockhead, can you eat a bit slower? No one is going to steal from you." Although old Zhang named the youth Bai Ziwang, Cui Hua felt that it was a mouthful and just called him Blockhead. Old Zhang silently looked at all of this. He didn't move his chopsticks and sighed with worry. Cui Hua said, "Father, what's wrong? There's a war again." Old Zhang sighed softly. "I heard that many people died in this battle. Many people lost their homes and lost their homes. Famine has begun to spread everywhere. Rebels have appeared among the victims. It is said that the rebels have already reached the county." At this point, he couldn't help but look at the youth who was holding the bucket and eating. He shook his head again. "Now there is a shortage of food everywhere. Money has depreciated. If we continue to eat like this in less than a month, our whole family will have nothing to eat. Then what should we do?" Cui Hua suddenly panicked. "Father, it's not like you don't know. Blockhead has been repairing the plank road for the past few days. They only gave him porridge to eat. After a few days, he has lost weight. What else can we do? I just hope that the war won't affect us." Old Zhang shook his head. "Tomorrow I'll go to the mountains to pick some wild vegetables and catch some game. I'll make them into dried goods and store them for emergencies. I'll eat less in the future and give my share to Blockhead." After saying that, Cui Hua took out a handkerchief and very carefully wiped the soup stains on the corner of the young man's mouth. Old Zhang's face twitched slightly. He hesitated for a moment and couldn't help but ask, "Do you like this silly boy?" "Father, what are you talking about?" Cui Hua's face turned red and she buried her head. "There are no outsiders in the room. Why can't you say it?" Old Zhang did not intend to let her go. "I'm already in my 50s this year. I don't have many years left to live. The person I'm most worried about is you. Your mother died early. Although I was the one who raised you, you matured much earlier than your peers. You started to learn to cook, do housework, do farm work, and even help me forge iron when you were only 6 or 7 years old." At this point, old Zhang looked ashamed. "Outsiders say that you're more capable than the average man. As your father, I don't feel good when I hear it. Because it's precisely because of this that your happiness has been delayed." "Father." Cui Hua's eyes were slightly red. "Listen to me." Old Zhang interrupted her and sternly said, "You're going to be 22 soon. It's impossible to be single forever. Father can't accompany you for a lifetime. Since you like this silly boy, then we might as well set a date for the 2 of you to get married." What? Do you think I haven't seen that you like this silly boy these days?" Old Zhang glared at her. Then, with a complicated expression, he looked at the youth who was eating and said, "Although this silly boy is silly and eats a lot, if it was in the past, I would definitely not agree." He paused for a moment. His eyebrows were full of lethargy. "But now there are military disasters everywhere. It would be dangerous for you to marry a normal person without any ability. It's better to marry this silly boy. At least he won't be sent to the front lines." "Then I'll listen to father," Cui Hua said in a low voice with a red face. "I've calculated the date for you. The 6th day of next month is an auspicious day. In other words, there's still half a month." Old Zhang seemed to have already prepared it. He continued to arrange, "When the time comes, we'll set up 2 tables and invite the villagers to a meal." On that day, the news of Zhang Ji's ironworks wedding spread throughout the village. After knowing that Cui Hua was going to marry a fool, the entire village thought that old Zhang had gone crazy. Old Zhang did not explain. He smiled and went from house to house to inform them of the date. He even gave some money to the official in charge of supervising the repair of the plank road and asked for 3 days of leave for Bai Ziwang on the day of the wedding. Seeing that it was hopeless to persuade old Zhang, the entire village could only accept it. In this turbulent era, being able to witness a couple of newlyweds was a happy event. What everyone did not know was that there was an invisible killing intent slowly approaching them in the darkness. In the great Kuan dynasty that East Zhang village belonged to, a man wearing a dragon robe sat absent-mindedly on the dragon throne. He looked at the battle report in his hand and murmured, "Defeated." The 800,000-strong army was defeated. Below him stood many courtiers. They all had their heads lowered and were trembling in fear, not saying a single word. In the past half a month, the newly established Great Qin dynasty had gathered the strength of the southern region and entered the central state with the help of the demon region. They fought against the attacks of the 3 great imperial dynasties and many holy lands. Even so, the Great Qin dynasty fought and won. Especially after the emperor of the Great Qin dynasty broke through to the emperor's throne realm, the flames of war intensified. Dynasties and empires were destroyed almost every day. As a force under the Great Qin imperial dynasty, the Great Kuan dynasty naturally had to participate in the war against the forces under the Great Qin dynasty. However, in the past half a month, they had suffered continuous defeat. There was even civil unrest in the country. The disaster victims formed a rebel army and caused chaos everywhere. "Your Majesty," after a while, a general could not help but say, "The Daluo dynasty's army under the Great Qin dynasty has already reached our Great Kuan territories Lin and Prefecture. What should we do now?" Everyone's expression changed when they heard this. To the north of Lin and Prefecture was the territory conquered by the enemy nation. To the south was 2/3 of Great Kuan's territory. In other words, the enemy nation had already conquered 1/3 of their territory. It had only been half a month. An official said weakly, "Why don't we surrender? It seems like the Great Qin imperial dynasty is finished. We might as well surrender to the Great Qin dynasty. That way we might still have a chance of survival." As soon as he finished speaking, his entire body suddenly split into a few pieces. The entire hall was dead silent. Surrender? This is what happens to those who dare to betray the Great Qin imperial dynasty. As a gloomy voice rang out in the hall, a black-clothed man descended. Emperor of Great Kuan stood up subconsciously. "Greetings, envoy. By the order of the Great Qin Emperor, I order you to gather all the spirit veins in the country and set up the 10,000 ghosts soul devourer array in Lin and Prefecture to slaughter the 1 million people in Lin and Prefecture." The man in black's sinister voice resounded in the hall. The 10,000 ghosts soul devourer array fused with 1 million dead souls will definitely deal a heavy blow to the Great Qin dynasty. What? Emperor of Great Kuan's hair stood on end. Slaughter the 1 million people. P.S. Chapter 4, updated for today. Don't think it's a stretch. This is the best point I can think of to enter the central state. Only this way can we find the female lead and the others quickly. End of this chapter. Chapter 1160. Time flew by, and several days passed in the blink of an eye. In these few days, the greatest change in East Zhang village was that every family was preparing for funerals. The elderly cried, and the women and children despaired. The war was too tragic. The Great Kuan dynasty had been beaten back by the enemy, the Daluo dynasty. None of the people from East Zhang village, who had been captured and sent to the front lines, had returned alive. The escalation of the war also caused the price of grain to rise and the value of money to depreciate. In the past, 1 jin of rice cost 20 copper coins, but now it had increased tenfold to 200 copper coins. Even so, tens of thousands of people still fought over it. Even East Zhang village was no exception. It wasn't that no one thought of escaping to a safe place, but it was said that the rebel army had already reached the prefecture. Moreover, most of the people in East Zhang village were old and weak, women and children who were unwilling or unable to leave their homeland. Steward Wu is still the smart one. He noticed something was wrong and reminded me to buy a house in the capital. Once the war reaches here, I'll move my family there. But this is also a good thing. At least before I leave, I can still make a fortune. East Zhang village's richest man, Zhang Yuanwei, smiled as he looked at the long line of people waiting in front of his house just to buy grain. He sold the moldy, worm-ridden old rice from his warehouse at 300 copper coins per jean. He wasn't afraid that no one would buy it. Old Zhang was also in the line. He'd spent all his savings to buy a bag of rice. Before leaving, he glared fiercely at Zhang Yunwei's fat body and cursed in a low voice, "Pa, a bastard who makes a fortune during a national crisis will die a horrible death." At the entrance of Zhangji Ironworks, a white-haired youth dressed in coarse clothes sat in a daze. Cui Hua, who was wearing women's clothes for the first time, stood behind him and gently combed his long hair with a comb. It could be said that the white-haired youth was the least affected in all of East Zhang village. He ate and slept every day. After the marriage was confirmed, old Zhang treated him as family. He knew that he had a large appetite and would rather eat chaff for himself and his daughter to save a portion of their rations. As Cui Hua combed his long hair, she murmured, "Blockhead, do you really not remember who you are?" She did not know how many times she had tried this, but she did not get a response from the young man every time. "Who am I?" However, this time, the white-haired young man's body trembled slightly. He seemed to have asked a question instead, and a hint of confusion flashed in his eyes. "You remember?" Cui Hua's hands froze. Then, she walked in front of him and nervously sized up his handsome face. "Who am I?" the white-haired young man asked again. His eyes began to struggle, as if he were in pain. Then, he held his head with both hands and began to scream. His change immediately frightened Cui Hua. The latter hurriedly comforted him. "If you can't remember, then don't think about it. If you can't remember, then don't think about it." Plop, the youth fell to the ground and fainted on the spot. Old Zhang, who came back with a bag of rice, immediately rushed over. "What happened to him?" "Father, Blockhead seems to have remembered something, but it's very painful." Cui Hua's eyes were red. "Give me a hand, quickly carry him in." In the next few days, old Zhang tried to make the white-haired young man remember the past. However, every time he mentioned it, the white-haired young man would scream as if he was possessed. In the end, old Zhang simply stopped asking and the young man also returned to normal. However, every day, he would sit at the door, either in a daze or writing something on the ground with a branch. "Father, what word did Blockhead write?" Cui Hua called old Zhang out and pointed to a word on the ground. "It seems to be a simplified version of Mo," old Zhang said uncertainly. He had only studied in a private school for 2 years and did not know many words. "What does Mo mean?" "I don't know either." Half a month, for everyone in Dongzhang village, was extremely difficult because the days were getting more and more difficult. However, for the white-haired young man, it was like a dream. In this chaotic world, for everyone, the better news was that it was said that the rebel army in the county had been wiped out. Some people tried to move south, but found that the entire Lin and county had set up checkpoints everywhere, not allowing people to move around. Even Zhang Yuanwei of Dongzhang village was no exception. Some people tried to break through the checkpoints, but in exchange, they were killed on the spot. The official statement to the outside world was to strictly investigate the enemy's spies and spies. Lin and County, Prefectural Prime Minister's Mansion. Prefectural Prime Minister Lu Zhen knelt on the ground and respectfully said to an old eunuch in front of him, "This lowly official greets Eunuch Wang. Lord Lu, this time I'm patrolling incognito. I'm here to convey the imperial edict to you by the emperor's order." An old eunuch with a fair face and no beard smiled, then handed the imperial edict in his hand to Lu Zhuan. "I won't read it." It's all on it, and only Lord Lu can read it. Don't leak it. Lu Xuan got up and took the imperial edict with both hands. After looking at it carefully, his whole body suddenly stiffened. Thousand ghosts devouring formation, slaughter the millions of people in my Lin Un county. He panted heavily like a bellows, and his eyes were full of disbelief. That was the lives of millions of people. More importantly, it was the people under his jurisdiction. Lord Lu, His Majesty has high hopes for you. I believe that you will not let him down. The old eunuch walked over and patted his shoulder lightly. In order to show his favor to you, His Majesty has just sent people to bring your family to the capital city. It can be considered as being away from the chaos of war and basking in the Emperor's grace. Lu Xuan's mind was buzzing, as though he was struck by lightning. His eyes became bloodshot, and his whole body trembled. After a few seconds, he knelt down heavily with his trembling body and stammered, I accept the imperial edict. Very good. The old eunuch smiled and nodded. In order to cooperate with Lord Lu, I've brought someone this time. He will definitely be able to get twice the result with half the effort. As his voice fell, a black shadow suddenly appeared in the enclosed room. Lord Lu, this is Lord Saw from the Fallen Spirits sect. You must listen to his arrangements. At the same time, make arrangements for the 100,000 troops, and do not leak the news, north of Lin and County, 1,000 miles away. Amidst the endless flags, there was a huge tent. In the tent, there were several figures with strong auras sitting upright. Everyone, the one standing in our way now is the great Kuan dynasty's Lin and County. A man in armor pointed at the huge sand map and said with assurance, although Lin and County is only a county with a population of only 1 million, it is the throat of the great Kuan kingdom. We must occupy this place before we can directly attack the capital of the great Kuan kingdom. The others nodded repeatedly when faced with his analysis, and a gray-robed old man frowned and said, It's only a county. Why don't we launch an attack right now? There's no rush. We, the Zenith Heaven Immortal Realm, are only here to assist in the battle. All military plans will have to go according to the Great Qin Envoy's arrangements. The armored man shook his head slightly. If nothing goes wrong, the Lord Emissary will send the order to attack before tomorrow night. Someone could not help but laugh. General Liang, what do you think the Great Qin will reward us if we, the Zenith Heaven Immortal, destroy the Great Kuan? I don't know about that. The armored man shook his head and laughed. But one thing is for sure. Based on how the Great Qin treats others, they will definitely not treat us badly. At this moment, a messenger walked into the tent and knelt on one knee. General Liang, the Lord Emissary has a special mission for me to convey to you. After saying that, he took out a portrait from his bosom. General Liang took it and opened it. The person in the portrait was a young man with deep eyes and a dignified look on his face. The most eye-catching thing about him was his head of white hair. Everyone in the tent was puzzled. General Liang frowned and looked at the kneeling messenger. Does the Lord Emissary have anything else to say? The Lord Emissary said that if we encounter the person in the portrait, we must report to him. The messenger did not dare to hide anything and said slowly, It is said that this order was personally issued by the Great Qin Emperor. Anyone who knows about it will be greatly rewarded. Everyone in the room gasped in shock. The Great Qin Emperor. Greatly rewarded. You may leave. After the messenger left, General Liang took a deep breath and his eyes flickered. Why is the Emperor looking for this person? End of this chapter. Chapter 1161. The next day, the 6th day of the 5th month of the lunar calendar. The gloomy East Zhang village finally had a hint of liveliness. The Zhang family smithy was going to hold a wedding. East Zhang village had already known about this so-called wedding half a month ago. Old Zhang was going to marry his daughter to a fool he picked up from the street. In the past, the villagers might have talked about it as a joke. However, under the dark clouds of war, no one had the mood to do so. Many people were already hungry. Now that the Zhang family was going to hold a wedding, they would definitely hold a banquet. Therefore, the villagers went to the Zhang family to help. They were busy until nighttime. There were a few red lanterns hanging at the entrance of the Zhang family smithy. Coupled with some laughter, it looked like a wedding. Old Zhang's original plan was to hold 3 to 5 tables. However, when he thought that everyone's life was not easy, he gritted his teeth and held 10 tables. However, the food on each table was not very sumptuous. There were a few plates of wild vegetables and a bowl of soup with oil visible. Even so, many of the originally pale villagers ate their fill. After the meal, some children formed groups to play, shouting that they wanted to make a scene in the bridal chamber. The white-haired young man was wearing a clean green shirt with a red flower hanging on his chest. He was surrounded by many children and only cared about giggling. The villagers wanted to tell him to treat the woman well in the future. However, when they thought of the former's IQ, they did not bother to say anything. Old Zhang did not mind. After the crowd dispersed, he dragged the white-haired young man into the house and said with a complicated expression, "Do you know what to do when you go in?" "Sleep," the white-haired young man said happily. Old Zhang wanted to say something, but in the end, he sighed softly. "Forget it, go in." "I'm hungry." The white-haired young man hurriedly shook his head. "Get in. You can eat tomorrow." Old Zhang was so angry that he directly pushed him into the newly decorated room. Then, ignoring the young man's resistance, he forcefully locked the door from the outside. "Mother of the child, you can rest in peace." Old Zhang wiped his tears, picked up a blanket and walked into the smithy. He took out the fruit wine that he brewed himself and drank it in one gulp. Under such a hazy moonlight, the entire Lin and county set off a silent bloody massacre. The 100,000-strong army was divided into many small teams and rushed to dozens of small villages under the county. The cold blades cut through the throats and pierced into the warm, innocent bodies outside Lin and county. In the midst of the dense torches, a newly built huge altar could be vaguely seen. The altar was about 1,000 square meters, and there were all kinds of strange runes drawn on it. The area below the altar was filled with spiritual energy. The spiritual qi was so dense that it was almost liquefied, and one could vaguely see streams of dragon-shaped airflow supporting the entire altar. In the middle of the altar, there were a dozen gloomy men in black robes, chanting something. The black-robed old man in the lead of the altar pinched his fingers lightly, his expression constantly changing. The person beside him asked, "Senior brother, what's wrong?" The black-robed old man frowned. "In order to complete this 1,000-spirit devourer formation, I'm afraid we need a ferocious spirit as the main spirit." "Ferocious spirit?" One of the black-robed men replied. "The people we kill are at most souls of the dead. A ferocious spirit needs to have a great amount of resentment. It's best if it's a person with the 8 characters of the horoscope and the weather tonight." "That's right, it's best if it's a woman." Someone else replied, "Women are of the Yin attribute, and they're dressed in red. If they were to undergo the concoction of the fallen spirits sect, they would be able to give birth to a ferocious spirit." The black-robed old man pondered for a long time before giving his orders. "Pass down my orders. If any of the villages see any women dressed in red, bring them all here, Dongzhang village, in the dead of night." Every household had their doors tightly shut. Apart from the red lanterns hanging outside Zhang Yuanwei and Zhang Ji's smithy, the entire Dongzhang village was in a state of silence. Inside Zhang Yuanwei's mansion dozens of black shadows appeared in the darkness of the night. All of them leaped up at the same time, climbing the walls and leaping into the mansion. Plop, plop, plop. The darkness of the night was filled with the glaring gleam of a blade. One by one, corpses fell to the ground, as the pungent smell of blood permeated the air. Within a few breaths of time, the entire mansion, including the servants and the guards, were all dead. "Old master, you've hurt me," Old Master's spirit is almost lost because of you." At this point, from the largest room, a faint sound of pain and numbness could be heard. More than a dozen black shadows silently moved forward to meet them. Within the huge room, the fat man, Zhang Yuanwei, was hugging a woman dressed in red, panting heavily. "Little Xiang if you can give Old Master a baby this time, Old Master will give you a title. Old Master still needs to buy you a lot of high-quality rouge and face powder. Old Master doesn't lack money." Just as this voice was about to reach its climax, a bright curved blade pierced through the curtains and sliced Zhang Yuanwei's neck. Blood flowed like a fountain. Ah! The woman on the bed was scared out of her wits. Another blade slashed towards her, but it was stopped by someone. "Don't kill her, bring her back." This scene seemed to be playing out in every house in Dongzhang village. The dark red color of blood rippled in the night. In Zhangji iron shop, several men dressed in black approached like ghosts, their shining blades piercing through the darkness. Child's mother, in the simple wooden shed, the drunken old Zhang had already fallen asleep, mumbling as if he was sleep-talking. "What's that sound?" One of the men in black stopped in his tracks, then turned around and walked step by step towards the wooden shed on the side. At this moment, a black cat suddenly jumped out of the wooden shed, letting out an ear-piercing cry as it fled in panic. "So it's a stray cat." The man let out a sigh of relief, then turned around to look at the brightly lit house and said in a low voice, "There's only one left." In the simple and crude bridal room, the oil lamp was bright. Cui Hua, who had long since put on a red wedding dress, quietly looked at the white-haired youth who was eating a piece of cake in front of her. Her slightly delicate and pretty facial features had a touch of captivating red. When the white-haired youth finished eating the cake in his hand, she couldn't help but reach out to wipe the corner of his mouth, and softly said, "Are you full?" "Hungry?" The white-haired youth looked at her anxiously. Cui Hua was immediately annoyed and unhappily said, "Eat, eat, eat. You only know how to eat. Don't you know what day it is tonight?" "Hungry," the youth said in a low and muffled voice, then got up, obviously wanting to go out to find food. "Don't move first." Cui Hua immediately pressed him down and fiercely said, "Listen to me for a few words, I'll find something for you to eat." The white-haired youth obediently sat down, very obedient. End of this chapter. Chapter 1162. Looking at his simple and honest appearance, Cui Hua could not help but laugh. Then, she reached out and gently caressed his face. "Blockhead, do you know? Although I am not clear about your identity and origin, I know that you are definitely not an ordinary person." Her eyes were full of gentleness. "At most, I can be considered a village girl. I have no experience and I am not good-looking. Apart from having strength, it can be said that I have nothing good about me. I am not worthy of you, but I really like you. Outsiders say that you are stupid, but in my opinion, you are stupid to the point of being cute." At this point, a sense of inferiority emerged in her eyes. "I am not tired of being with you at all. I admit that I am a little selfish, but don't worry, I will find a way with Father to restore your memory." Hungry, the white-haired youth began to protest. Okay, I will go out and find food for you. I don't know if Father is asleep." She wiped away her tears and smiled sweetly. Then, she got up and walked towards the door. In the end, she found that the door could not be pushed open at all. It was as if it was locked. "Father, are you asleep? Open the door for me." Cui Hua shook the door and shouted. Boom! At that moment, the tightly closed door suddenly shattered. She, along with the broken pieces of the door, fell heavily to the ground. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh! More than 10 black figures jumped in. Each of them held a shining curved blade in their hands. Their bodies were bathed in the pungent smell of blood. "Who are you people?" Cui Hua could not care about the sharp pain in her hand. She subconsciously got up and looked at them with fear. The red-clothed woman? The eyes of the leading black-clothed man focused. Then, he scanned the inside of the house. His gaze fell on the white-haired man at the side. "Take this woman away. Kill the man. Following his order, someone held a curved blade and walked towards the white-haired man with large strides. The white-haired man immediately shouted in fear. "You dare!" Seeing this scene, Cui Hua's expression changed slightly. She did not know where the courage came from, but she stood in front of the white-haired man. She casually grabbed a stick and waved it with all her might. The man immediately stopped his step. "Do it!" The leading black-clothed man coldly snorted. "Who are you people?" At this time, a drunken questioning voice came from outside the door. Surprisingly, old Zhang, who was sleeping in the wooden shed, was awakened by the sound of the door breaking. What he got in response was a sharp saber light. Old Zhang's hair stood on end as he instinctively dodged in a panic. Even so, his right arm was chopped off by the saber, and the piercing pain completely woke him up. "Dad!" Cui Hua, who witnessed this scene, burst into tears. Taking advantage of this gap, a black-clothed man instantly got close to her and knocked the stick out of her hand. Then, he grabbed it. "You bastards, let go of my daughter!" Old Zhang's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He grabbed an axe by the door and rushed in. Bang! However, his entire body was kicked away. "Kill them all and burn the house!" The leading black-clothed man ignored Cui Hua's resistance and walked out of the room. His incomparably indifferent voice sounded. "Kill!" A black-clothed man held a scimitar and slashed at the white-haired man who was yelling. In his opinion, facing such ordinary people, he could split them in half with one slash. Let me go, Blockhead, Dad. I beg you, don't kill Blockhead and my dad." Cui Hua struggled with all her might and cried bitterly. Old Zhang had lost a lot of blood. He struggled to stand up, but he found that he could not muster any strength at all. He could only watch as the saber landed on the white-haired youth's body. Clang! With an ear-piercing sound of metal colliding, the incomparably sharp saber did not hurt the white-haired youth at all. Instead, a gap appeared on the edge of the saber. How is this possible? The black-clothed man's face was full of disbelief. His saber was forged in the army. It was unknown how many enemies' heads had been chopped off. Even if the opponent's body was made of stone, there should at least be a crack. "Don't kill me! Don't kill me!" The white-haired youth shrank in the corner and trembled as he shouted. The rest of the people also noticed that something was wrong. With a loud bang, they swarmed up, and more than a dozen sharp sabers slashed at the white-haired youth. Clang, clang, clang! With a burst of sparks, more than a dozen people were shocked to find that the sabers in their hands were all broken, and the white-haired youth in front of them was still unharmed. This time, even Cui Hua and old Zhang, who had already lost all hope, were shocked. The black-clothed man who was the leader outside the house narrowed his eyes and immediately said, "There's something wrong with this person. We can't stay for long. Go!" He had lived in the army for a long time and had heard that there were cultivators who specialized in training their bodies and were invulnerable. He did not expect to meet one today. The dozen or so people had long been scared out of their wits and rushed out in a hurry. The black-clothed man who was the leader grabbed Cui Hua and was about to leave. However, old Zhang rushed over and hugged his feet tightly. "You're not allowed to leave. Let go of my daughter, old thing, get lost." The black-clothed man wanted to shake him off, but found that old Zhang was hugging him tightly and would not let go no matter what. "Kill him, quickly kill him!" He roared again and again. Immediately after, someone slashed at old Zhang's back with a saber, and blood immediately splashed everywhere. The white-haired youth, who was originally shouting in the house, suddenly quieted down when he saw this scene. There was a strong struggle in his eyes. "Father!" Cui Hua screamed at the top of her lungs. "Don't kill my father! Don't kill my father! Blockhead, quickly, quickly save my father!" However, old Zhang still tightly hugged the black-clothed man's leg and said word by word, Let go of my daughter." Another few slashes were slashed down, directly cutting off old Zhang's hands and feet. His flesh and blood were a mess. "Father!" Cui Hua almost fainted. The white-haired youth suddenly hugged his head and screamed. Countless scenes emerged in his mind like a tide. Go, quickly go! The black-clothed man who was the leader directly knocked Chui Hua out, jumped, and directly disappeared into the darkness. The remaining dozen or so people lit torches and threw more than 10 torches into the house. Suddenly, a monstrous fire was ignited. In the raging fire, the white-haired youth was still hugging his head and screaming. The surrounding hot flames did not cause him any harm. Blockhead! I'm a blockhead? No, I'm not a blockhead. The white-haired youth tried his best to digest the memories in his mind. Who am I? I'm Yi Chen? I'm the mad southern immortal? I'm mad southern Yi? Subsequently, he was no longer in pain, and he no longer screamed. His blank eyes gradually became clear. I remember now. I'm Yi Chen. I disregarded the restriction of true origin energy and forcefully performed the true Spirit 9 transformations. I transformed into the ancient demonic ape and fought against 6 martial saints. I was ambushed by an Emperor's Throne powerhouse. End of this chapter. Chapter 1163. Outside the house, more than 10 men in black sneered as they looked at the raging fire in front of them. Even if this person has a powerful body, he can't be afraid of fire, can he? That's right, unless he's a god, however. Just as they were about to leave, the scene that greeted them shocked them to death. The raging fire that seemed to be able to devour everything suddenly split apart as if it had a life of its own. A white-haired young man slowly stepped out of the air. The first thing that everyone saw was the white-haired young man's pupils. Then, they screamed and retreated a few steps, covering their eyes. They saw 2 balls of golden flames in the white-haired young man's pupils. The flames burned in his eyes as if they were looking at 2 small suns at close range. Why are you a human or a ghost? A man in black looked at Yi Chen in fear and said while trembling. Kill him. The rest of them braced themselves and charged forward. At the next moment, however, they realized that they could not move their bodies as if they had been immobilized. Yi Chen walked slowly to old Zhang's side. He lowered his head and looked at the bloody man who was only breathing weakly. A complicated expression flashed through his eyes as he could not help but recall the scenes that had happened since he woke up. Those scenes were like a dream. Although it was only a short month, it seemed like an endless cycle of reincarnation. If you go with the flow, you'll become immortal, and if you go against the flow, you'll become an immortal. Thanks to you guys, I've comprehended the concept of becoming immortal again. Yi Chen sighed softly and waved his sleeve. A large amount of spiritual energy in his body surged into old Zhang's body. If one took a closer look, it was not just spiritual energy but also a faint concept. This concept seemed to be the law of heaven and earth. Under the horrified gazes of the men in black, who were frozen, old Zhang's severed limbs began to regenerate at a speed visible to the naked eye. The wounds on his body quickly scabbed. I am not dead? Old Zhang, who had woken up, was both surprised and confused. He could not help but say when he saw Yi Chen standing before him, "And blockhead, are you all right?" "Old man, my name is Yi Chen." Yi Chen smiled lightly. "Why Yi Chen?" Old Zhang was slightly stunned. He then looked at Yi Chen in disbelief. "Why you remember?" In his eyes, Yi Chen's gaze was no longer dull. It was extremely deep like a bottomless abyss. "Not bad," Yi Chen said. "Thank you for taking care of me these days." For some reason, in that instant old Zhang felt an indescribable sense of disappointment. He didn't have time to think too much and begged bitterly, "Save. Quickly save Chui Hua, of course." Yi Chen nodded lightly and turned around to look at the dozen or so men in black before him. Red lightning flashed in his eyes. Great Qin Dynasty, 100 Dynasty War, Great Kuan Dynasty, Lin and County, 10,000 Ghost soul-devouring array. Countless information surged into his mind, and traces of murderous aura appeared between his brows. In order to set up such a sinister formation, you didn't hesitate to slaughter millions of people. "Good, very good, old man, let's go. I'll bring you there. I know where they are. Yi Chen lifted his head slowly and looked at old Zhang. Old Zhang subconsciously looked at the dozen or so men in black next to him. What about them? Under his terrified gaze, the bodies of the dozen or so people suddenly burst into flames. Then, they turned into countless specks of light that looked like fireflies and scattered everywhere. Let's go! Yi Chen waved his sleeve. Amidst old Zhang's exclamation, he carried him 5 kilometers away with a single step. 100 kilometers away, a man in black grabbed a woman and fled frantically. Too long and the rest didn't catch up. It seems like they're dead. Thinking to this point, he rushed even more desperately. When he finally arrived at the meeting point, he saw that there were already dozens of men in black gathered there. Each of them was holding a woman in red. Someone asked suspiciously, "Officer Ding, why are you alone? Where are the others?" "Run, run quickly," Officer Ding shuddered. An old man in black said in a deep voice, "Speak clearly. Why are you running? Could it be that the enemy is attacking?" The former immediately told him everything that had happened to Yi Chen. "If it's really as you said, this person must be a cultivator, and he's at the innate stage." The old man in black's expression turned grim as he sneered, however, "So what if that's the case? With me here, I'll be able to kill him." At the next moment, 2 figures suddenly walked out of the void. Officer Ding was scared out of his wits when he saw the white-haired Yi Chen. "It's him, it's him!" Tearing space, the old man in black's expression changed drastically as he inhaled sharply. This person can actually tear space apart. He must be an Emperor stage cultivator. He took out a rescue talisman and shot it into the sky as he thought to this point. Then, he looked at Yi Chen and threatened, "Senior, the Divine Wind Sect, a grade 9 sect of Dakuan, is guarding 50 kilometers away from here. I hope you won't." Bang, 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 dozens of bloody mists exploded in the air. Yi Chen grabbed through the air and grabbed the unconscious Tsuehua over. He handed it to old Zhang. Then, he grabbed through the air. Countless spiritual energy gathered into a golden sword in his hand. "Take this sword back with you. It can protect your safety. If you encounter any danger, just say the word, and I can kill all living beings within a radius of 3,000 meters. I'll come back for you guys after I'm done." With that, he headed straight for the Divine Wind Sect. Old Zhang was stunned on the spot. He stared blankly at Yi Chen's retreating figure. The shock in his heart could not dissipate even now. What kind of person did the father and daughter save? The Grade 9 sect, the Divine Wind Sect, was one of the few Grade 9 sects in the entire Dakuan dynasty. The sect had over 10,000 disciples, countless resources, and 3 martial saints. At this moment, within the Divine Wind Sect, the Divine Wind Sect's sect master leaped into the air and frowned as he looked at the fireworks that exploded in the sky. A rescue talisman? Could it be that the powerhouses of the Daluo dynasty have arrived? Right at this moment, a white-haired man descended from the sky. His white hair fluttered in the wind, and his gaze was terrifying. "Who are you?" The Divine Wind Sect's sect master's pupils constricted. Subsequently, 2 old figures tore through the air and arrived. They were the only 2 martial saints left in the Divine Wind Sect. Seeing that the young man did not say a word, the Divine Wind Sect's sect master shouted, "How dare you barge into my Divine Wind Sect? Leave your life here." A huge hand suddenly appeared in the air. It turned into 1,000 meters tall and descended from the sky, directly drowning the entire Divine Wind Sect. Tens of thousands of disciples died. Even the 3 martial saints, including the Divine Wind Sect's sect master, were destroyed. He killed a sect with a raise of his hand. Yi Chen's expression was extremely calm. He turned around and rushed toward Lin and County. The killing intent in his eyes intensified. He was going to massacre Dakuan today. End of this chapter. Chapter 1164. East Zhang Village, Zhangji Iron Shop's entrance. The original iron shop had long since been buried in the fire, leaving behind only ruins and the pungent smell of smoke. Old Zhang knelt on the ground as if he had lost his soul. Beside him lay the unconscious Cui Hua. On the way back with his daughter, he saw corpses all along the way. Countless houses were buried in the fire. Dead, they're all dead. Old Zhang tightly held the golden sword in his hand, his body trembling non-stop. More than 300 people in East Zhang village, regardless of whether they were men or women, old or young, were all killed by the mysterious group of black-clothed men. Not a single person was left alive. Zhang Yuanwei's death was not to be regretted. The only thing that made him sad was old Yuan, who sold bamboo baskets in the east of the village, Shi Zhen, who liked to come and drink wine, and the widow next door whose man died in the army. Those familiar faces were now nothing but cold corpses, which kept pounding into his mind. Old Zhang, who was over 50 years old, had sleepy eyes. He actually hugged his head, squatted down and cried bitterly. What did we do wrong? Why do we have to suffer like this? He bent his legs and knelt on the ground. East Zhang village was his home, but now, his home was no longer there. Those distant relatives and neighbors of the past were all dead, leaving only the father and daughter. At this time, an incomparably weak voice came from behind him. Father. Old Zhang hurriedly wiped his tears and turned to look at Cui Hua, who had just woken up. He squeezed out a stiff smile from his face. Daughter, are you all right? Cui Hua seemed to be at a loss. After looking around, a trace of clarity returned to her eyes. Father, why am I here? Wasn't I taken away by someone? And you? Aren't you? She covered her mouth and looked at old Zhang, her eyes filled with disbelief. She clearly remembered that her father's hands and feet had been cruelly chopped off by that group of people. So why was he standing in front of her now? Father, where's Blockhead? A thought suddenly flashed through her mind, and then she suddenly looked at the ruins behind her, her body trembling violently. Moo! Blockhead! After saying that, she rushed into the ruins. Old Zhang hurriedly pulled her back and sighed softly. Your Blockhead is not dead, but… Then where is he? But what? Faced with Cui Hua's loss of control, old Zhang's heart was slightly stifled. His expression was incomparably complicated as he narrated the events in full detail. After a long while, the night fell into a deathly silence, leaving only the father and daughter facing each other in silence. Father, you lied to me, didn't you? Cui Hua felt as if she had been struck by lightning, her mind rumbling endlessly. What did she hear? Not only was her wooden block not burned to death by the fire, but it also recovered its memory and became normal. It even killed those mysterious people and healed her father's limbs. Old Zhang knew that it was hard for her to accept it for a while, so it was worth it to stand aside and wait for her to digest it. In fact, how could he accept it? Even though he had seen everything with his own eyes, he still felt like he was in a dream. In reality, people like Yi Chun were too far away from ordinary people like them. They were so far away that they could only live in the myth that the neighbors bragged about. After an unknown amount of time, Cui Hua sat on the ground with a dazed expression. She bit her lip and said, Father, you said Blockhead is an immortal? Maybe. Old Zhang took a deep breath in and subconsciously tightened his grip on the golden sword in his hand. At this moment, the ground began to tremble faintly, as if there were thousands of troops and horses galloping over. Under the father and daughter's terrified expressions, they saw a large number of armored and halberd-wielding troops surging over. Old Zhang instinctively protected his daughter behind him, holding the golden sword tightly in his hand. He did not know if the golden sword could really protect them, but it was their only hope. Enemy! This is the enemy's army. When he saw the armor and black flags worn by the army, old Zhang became even more nervous. When he was young, he had been to Lin'an County. On the streets, he had seen the soldiers of the enemy Daluo dynasty being paraded through the street. The Daluo dynasty's army suddenly stopped. The vanguard pointed at old Zhang and his daughter. General, there are people here. Take them down. As an indifferent voice rang out, more than a dozen people rushed toward the father and daughter with a ferocious aura. Old Zhang extended the golden sword in his hand by instinct. His body was trembling as he tried his best to recall the method of use that Yi Chen had told him before he left. Wait! Right at this moment, an old voice suddenly came from the army. There was a trace of fear in the voice. At the next moment, a purple-clothed old man suddenly leaped out and walked slowly to old Zhang and his daughter. He stared at the golden sword. "Sir, don't be nervous." Seemingly seeing old Zhang's nervousness, the purple-clothed old man smiled and said, "I'm from the Daluo dynasty. I won't hurt you commoners. I'm just asking a few simple questions." Old Zhang looked at him warily. The purple-clothed old man was not angry. He took a deep look at the golden sword in his hand and said fearfully, "May I ask who gave you this sword?" He was a member of the Daluo dynasty's martial saint mountain, and he had been worshipped by Daluo for generations. This time, he had followed the army to deal with the martial saint of Dakuan. According to common sense, a commoner like old Zhang wouldn't be able to enter his eyes at all, and he wouldn't let him appear in person. However, it was all because of the golden sword in old Zhang's hand. It gave him, a three-revolution martial saint, a creepy feeling. It seemed to be the might of an emperor's stage. He had a feeling that once old Zhang activated the golden sword, he and the army of 100,000 behind him would probably be annihilated. That was why he showed up in time to stop it. Old Zhang said in a threatening manner, "This was given to me by my son-in-law." Son-in-law. The purple-clothed old man narrowed his eyes. Even though he did not believe old Zhang's words, he still said, "Sir, you can leave now." With that, he leaped back into the army. "Let's go." The army set off once again. In the eyes of old Zhang and his daughter, they headed south in an orderly manner. Old Zhang only snapped out of his daze when they were far away. He could not believe that the enemy's army would not kill them. He looked at the golden sword in his hand thoughtfully and subconsciously tightened his grip. Amidst the army, a luxurious carriage was escorted by the crowd as it advanced forward. As the commander of the army, Liang Wu urged his horse forward and rode alongside the carriage. He could not help but ask, "Elder Wu, why did you let those two people go?" Although Liang Wu was the commander-in-chief of this expedition, his tone was very courteous. This was because even the current emperor had to show some respect to the existence in the carriage. It was also the god in their hearts. After a few seconds, the purple-clothed old man's voice came from the carriage. "General Liang, did you see the golden sword in that old man's hand?" End of this chapter. Chapter 1165. Liang Wu nodded slightly and couldn't help but narrow his eyes. "Elder Wu, could it be that there's something wrong with that golden sword? This sword has a hint of Emperor's aura. I'm guessing that it belongs to an Emperor's throne expert." The words of the violet-clothed old man caused Liang Wu to be repeatedly shocked in his heart. "If all of you had wanted to kill those two earlier and force the golden sword to activate, then I can guarantee that all the living beings in an area of 3 kilometers would have been annihilated, and even I would have died." What? An Emperor's throne-strong practitioner? Liang Wu's mind went blank. He knew very well what an Emperor's throne practitioner represented, because in the entire central prefecture, every Emperor's throne expert was either the ruler of a country or the leader of a holy land. Even so, there had never been an Emperor's throne expert in the Daluo dynasty and the Great Kuan dynasty since ancient times. An Emperor's throne expert has appeared in the Great Kuan realm. I wonder if it will affect our Zenith Heaven's plan to attack the Great Kuan realm. The purple-robed old man was worried. Then, he changed the topic and said, "By the way, I remember that the Great Kuan dynasty's Divine Wind sect is stationed 50 kilometers away from here." "Not bad." Liang Wu nodded and said with some fear, "Old Wu, should we take a detour?" As a grand heavenly immortal, he had also heard rumors about the Divine Wind sect. It was said that this sect was one of the few ninth-grade sects in the Great Kuan realm, and there were even 3 martial saints in the sect. No. The purple-robed old man smiled faintly. 100 years ago, this old man was defeated by the Divine Wind sect's sect master, Feng Baixiu. Since I'm passing by today, this old man would like to experience it for myself. Let's go straight to the Divine Wind sect. An hour later, at the abandoned site of the Divine Wind sect, Liang Wu and the purple-robed old man stared at the ruins in front of them in disbelief. Their eyes were filled with deep shock. This was because a palm print had appeared in the ruins in front of them. It was as if a giant palm had slammed down from the sky and directly destroyed the entire Divine Wind sect. The Divine Wind sect that had once shaken the Great Kuan and Zenith Heaven realms, and was even infamous in the Central Plains, had been destroyed. A strong practitioner of the Emperor's throne. He must be a strong practitioner of the Emperor's throne. The purple-robed elder's lips trembled as he muttered, "I was right. Only a strong practitioner of the Emperor's throne can destroy a sect." While Liang Wu, who was beside him, was shocked, wild joy surged into his heart. Looks like this Emperor's throne realm expert has enmity with De Kuan. I wonder who he is? Could it be that Great Qin's Emperor Lord has descended? Less than 500 miles away from Lin and County, Yi Chen stood in the air and sped along the way. Now that he had comprehended the concept of becoming immortal again, other than the lack of quintessential qi in his body, he was no different from a soul-forming stage cultivator. Everywhere he passed, he saw only slaughter, endless slaughter. Regardless of gender, age or gender, everyone died under the butcher's knife. Even though these people had nothing to do with him, he still saved them in the end. As for the perpetrators, they were all killed by him. Thank you for your kindness, immortal. Countless people in Lin and County knelt down in front of him, mixed with all kinds of helpless cries. Head north and look for an old blacksmith in East Zhang village. This person can protect you, Yi Chen said, and suddenly increased his speed. He took a step forward and teleported 5 kilometers away in the blink of an eye. After a few hundred breaths of time, a majestic city came into view. However, the city was already in flames and was filled with dense death energy. Outside the city, a huge altar that covered an area of hundreds of square meters had already been set up. There was a formation set up around the altar. It was like a huge black hole that was crazily tearing at the yin energy and souls between heaven and earth. At the center of the altar, women in red had their hands and feet tied as they knelt on the ground. Behind them, there were black-robed men with dark energy torturing them with the cruelest punishment in the world. The great 1,000 ghost devouring formation required ferocious souls to guard it. Ordinary people could only turn into ghosts after death. Therefore, if one wanted to give birth to a ferocious soul, one had to torture the dead while they were alive. That way, the resentment would increase, and only after death would there be a chance to give birth to a ferocious soul. All sorts of incomparably shrill screams resounded between heaven and earth. It was like the roar of thousands of ghosts. It was a ghastly sight. As the women were tortured to death, a black-robed man extracted their souls and said with a frown, "Senior brother, they didn't capture enough women. Only one vengeful spirit was born out of nearly 300 women. If the ferocious soul doesn't come out, how can the great 1,000 ghost devouring formation be completed?" A black-robed old man's eyes were sinister. His name was Suoming, and he was from the Darkhan dynasty's grade 9 sect, the Fallen Spirits sect. He was also the person who set up the great 1,000 ghost devouring formation. At this moment, a man walked to his side and whispered, "Sir, we found the person you're looking for. Bring him here." Suoming could not help but reveal a look of ecstasy. Immediately after, a few men in black brought a petite girl in white who was only 15 or 16 years old over. The girl's mouth was gagged, and her hands and feet were tied. She could only struggle with all her might, and her beautiful eyes were filled with fear. The moment he saw that person, the expression of Lin An County's deputy minister, Lu Ziyuan, who was standing in the distance like a puppet, changed drastically. Tong Tong, Lu Ziyuan cried out in disbelief, and then he pounced over frantically. Tong Tong, the girl in front of him was his only daughter. He got his daughter at an old age and regarded her as the apple of his eye. He did not expect that she would be brought here. The moment the girl saw him, she struggled more and more intensely, and her eyes were filled with a pleading look. Get lost. Someone kicked Lu Ziyuan away. Lu Ziyuan screamed and knelt heavily on the ground, begging bitterly, Sir Saw, please let my daughter go. I have done everything you ordered. The black-robed old man laughed cruelly. Deputy Minister Lu, I'm sorry. Your daughter is the lady of 4 that I'm looking for. She's the most suitable to be the ferocious soul of the formation. No! Lu Ziyuan's eyes were bloodshot. I'm an official of the imperial court. You can't touch my daughter. She's only 15 years old. An official of the imperial court? Suo Ming smiled disdainfully. Since you're an official of the imperial court, you should know that this plan concerns the fate of the great Kuan dynasty. You should sacrifice yourself for the country. Suo Ming no longer paid attention to him. After grabbing the girl in white with one hand, his fingernails directly pierced into the top of the former's skull, and he muttered, No. Lu Ziyuan begged again and again. Retribution, it's really retribution. He, Lu Ziyuan, once boasted that he was an honest official and loved the people like his own children. However, for the sake of his family, he had to acquiesce in the massacre of the entire county. Now the retribution was on his daughter. Noisy old man. Suo too felt noisy in his ears. His eyes turned cold, and a wisp of spiritual power turned into a poisonous scorpion and attacked Lu Ziyuan. Lu Ziyuan could not help but show despair. Just as the poisonous scorpion was about to fall on him, a purple thunderbolt fell from the sky. The purple lightning struck the scorpion's body with unerring accuracy, and the latter vanished into thin air with a loud bang. End of this chapter. Chapter 1166. Aha! Suo Ming suddenly felt a piercing headache in his mind, and then he tossed down the young woman in his hand and held his head while letting out shrill cries without end. That poisonous scorpion was an illusion created by his spiritual power. Since it was defeated, it naturally damaged his soul. Lu Ziyuan was dumbfounded. Who's there? The surrounding strong cultivators from Fallen Spirits sect all rushed out and surveyed their surroundings with a sinister look on their faces. The next moment, a white-haired young man descended from the sky. The young man's gaze was cold, and there was a dense baleful aura between his brows. Who are you? How dare you obstruct our Fallen Spirits sect? One of the Fallen Spirits sect's Wuzongs took a step forward and rose into the air. His expression was ferocious. Yi Chen lifted his eyes and looked around. When he saw the altar that seemed to have turned into hell, the killing intent in his eyes intensified. This person must be an expert sent by an enemy origin immortal. One of the Fallen Spirits sect's martial kings narrowed his eyes as his killing intent surged. Kill him! Boom! In the blink of an eye, several powerful fighters from the Fallen Spirits sect leaped into the air and charged towards Yi Chen. The yin energy around their bodies increased exponentially. You deserve to die! A voice that was as cold as winter came out of Yi Chen's mouth. He scanned with his divine consciousness and immediately suppressed the surroundings like heavenly might. Bang, bang, bang! The few strong cultivators from Fallen Spirits sect who were charging towards Lin Fan had their bodies disintegrated into a mist of blood. The Fallen Spirits sect martial king who was the furthest away spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was filled with shock. Who was this person? How terrifying! The killing intent in Yi Chen's eyes did not diminish. He leaped to the ground and charged at Suo Ming and the rest. Fellow Taoist, let's talk things out. Suo Ming's expression changed drastically. His heart was filled with fear as he shouted, I am the elder of the Fallen Spirits sect, Suo Ming. He thought that Yi Chen was a martial saint like him. Moreover, Yi Chen was merciless, so he had no choice but to threaten Yi Chen. Yi Chen did not even look at that person. His pressure covered the place. Then, he slammed his palm down and crushed that person's body and soul directly. Devil, this person is a devil. The surrounding disciples of Fallen Spirits sect were shocked as they scrambled to escape in all directions. All of you should die. Then, a mighty voice came from the sky. It was like a thunderclap that shook the heavens and the earth. In an instant, the bodies of countless people at the scene exploded, turning into a red mist that was on the verge of materializing. Throughout the entire process, Lu Ziyuan and the gagged girl watched in horror. In their eyes, Suo Ming and the others were already formidable like gods on the earth, yet they were annihilated by this white-haired young man with a raise of his hand. While he was still in a daze, he saw the white-haired young man looking at him coldly before slowly walking over. Plop! Lu Zun's body trembled violently, and then he knelt down heavily on the ground and said with a trembling voice, "Minister of Lin An County, Lu Zun, greets the immortal." Scram! Yi Chen waved his sleeve and sent the father and daughter flying several kilometers away. At the same time, he said, "The 3,000-meter forbidden area will kill anyone who enters." After saying that, he lowered his head and looked at the dense underground spirit veins around the altar again. Spiritual chi that was visible to the naked eye reverberated between heaven and earth, as if it was trying to maintain this formation. In order to set up the 10,000 Ghost Devourer formation to intercept the Daluo dynasty's attack, the Great Kuan dynasty did not hesitate to move all the spirit veins in the country here. Disregarding the lives of over 100 people to use such a sinister technique, it seems like the Great Kuan dynasty shouldn't exist in this world. Yi Chen's expression was calm as he sensed the abundant spiritual energy between heaven and earth. There was a smile in his eyes instead. This spirit vein has benefited me. Perhaps I can use the spiritual energy here to break through to God transformation stage. As soon as he finished speaking, with a wave of his hand, he directly set up a defensive barrier within a radius of 3,000 meters. Then, he sat cross-legged and closed his eyes. As the tip of his nose began to move rhythmically, every pore on his body moved as well. The spiritual energy between heaven and earth surged toward him at a speed visible to the naked eye. Several kilometers away, as soon as Lu Ziyuan landed, he helped the white-clothed girl up. He removed the cloth from her mouth and cried tears of joy, "Tong Tong, are you all right?" "Father, I'm fine." The father and daughter hugged their heads and cried. Clearly, they had yet to snap back to their senses from the earlier scene. After a while, the white-clothed girl looked at the huge altar a few kilometers away. "Father, was that an immortal?" "It must be an immortal." Lu Ziyuan looked grateful. He knew very well that Yi Chen killed the people from the Fallen Spirits sect but did not kill them. That was undoubtedly a great favor. "Father, I want to be that immortal's disciple." The white-clothed girl gripped the corner of her father's shirt tightly and walked toward the altar. "No!" Lu Ziyuan pulled her back immediately and said with a bitter smile, "That immortal said that anyone who enters the forbidden area will die. Let's go back quickly." "No, I want to wait for him." The white-clothed girl was extremely stubborn. In the capital region of the Great Kuan dynasty, in a gloomy palace that looked like hell. Boom, 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 with a series of explosions, countless soul tablets shattered in the Fallen Spirits sect. "Suo Ming is dead," an old man wrapped in sinister energy suddenly said. "Although he's a two-revolution martial saint, even if he encountered an enemy martial saint, he should be able to escape with his soul, right?" "Not necessarily." Another gloomy old man appeared and said coldly, "I heard that the old man with the surname Wu from the Daluo dynasty is here too. Could it be that he attacked?" "It should be." The Fallen Spirits sect master narrowed his eyes and said coldly, "We can't afford to lose the 10,000 spirit devouring formation. Supreme Elders, it seems like we have to make a trip to Lin and County. At the altar in Lin and County. After the last bit of spiritual energy in the world was refined, Yi Chen opened his eyes slowly and mumbled, "Now that my true origin energy has been replenished, it's time to communicate with heaven and earth with my intent. Shattering nascent soul," he said softly and closed his eyes again. He stretched his arms, and the nascent soul in his dantian slowly dissipated. "My intent is life and death." As a murmur came out of his mouth, traces of a mysterious intent spread out with him as the center. The life and death intent enveloped 30 meters, 60 meters, 300 meters, 1,500 meters, 10,000 meters. In the end, it enveloped the entire Lin and County, and even the entire Great Kuan dynasty. At that moment, everyone in the entire Great Kuan dynasty, from the cultivators to the mortals, no matter what they were doing, could sense the change. It was a wonderful feeling. It was like a blessing to the soul, but it was also like the will of heaven and earth was whispering silently. At that moment, all the mortals seemed to have sensed something and knelt in Yi Chen's direction. They could not help but worship him. On the other hand, the cultivators were extremely terrified. What they felt was an oppressive might, a will of supremacy between heaven and earth. Under such a will, they were filled with endless panic. End of this chapter. Chapter 1167. Bang, bang, bang. Countless cultivators also knelt on the ground in worship. The higher one's cultivation base was, the more they could sense the subtle changes, and the more frightened they were. At that moment, all the martial sages of the entire Great Kuan dynasty came out of closed-door cultivation. Their expressions changed greatly as they felt uneasy. At the peak of the Great Kuan dynasty's imperial city, an old man in a golden robe looked in the direction of Lin and Commandery and said with difficulty, Is someone trying to break through to the Emperor's throne realm?" Behind him, there were countless figures with powerful auras. Even the current Emperor of Great Kuan was among them. As soon as his voice fell, the people behind him immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. Their expressions changed, and disbelief surged out from their eyes. An Emperor's throne powerhouse. An Emperor's throne powerhouse was about to be born in the Zenith Heaven immortal realm? The son of Great Kuan stared at the golden-robed old man with boundless joy in his eyes. "Patriarch, who are you? Who is it?" The reason why his Great Kuan was dragged into the 100 Empire War and even had his fate manipulated by the Great Yin Imperial Dynasty was also because there were no Emperor's throne experts in his country. If the Great Kuan had an Emperor's throne expert, the Central Plains would definitely face a new reshuffle, and the Great Kuan would definitely rise. This pressure is too vast. The golden-robed elder stared at the direction of Lin and County. "This person is in the north. Who is he? Gather everyone and come with me." He pointed in the direction of Lin and County and said, "This person is in the critical period of breaking through. It's fine if he's from De Kuan, but if he's not, boundless killing intent swept across the world." At the same time, less than 100 miles away from Lin and County, an army of up to 300,000 people was moving forward. Reporting, there's no one within a 50-kilometer radius. Reporting, there's no one within a radius of 80 li. As the scouts returned to report, Liang Wu, who was in the army, frowned even more deeply. His goal was to launch an all-out attack and completely conquer the Great Kuan dynasty's Lin and County. For this, he had brought 300,000 soldiers and was even prepared for a fierce battle. However, as the army pushed forward for hundreds of miles, they didn't see a single person. All they saw were corpses and a tragic scene. Out of the quality of a professional soldier, he followed the carriage in the army and whispered, "Old Wu, something is wrong. There is not a single living person in the entire Lin and County. You suspect that this is De Kuan's trap?" The purple-robed elder in the carriage frowned. "There's definitely something fishy going on." Liang Wu nodded slowly. I suggest we reorganize on the spot and send out all the scouts at the same time. At this moment, a fast horse came from the front. A scout landed on the ground and reported, "General, we've captured a few hundred people. Bring me there." Liang Wu was overjoyed. He led his men and followed after them. Only then did he realize that the so-called several hundred people were actually commoners who were fleeing from a disaster. The scout stepped forward and said, "General, I have asked. They all said that they are the people of Lin and County. 2 hours ago there were black-clothed people massacring the villages. Then why are they still alive?" Liang Wu frowned. The scout said, "According to them, an immortal saved them. That immortal even told them to head north, to a place called Dongzhang village." Immortal? The purple-robed elder who followed up smiled disdainfully, thinking that it was a lie. However, after hearing the words Dongzhang village, his face slightly froze. "Did they say what the immortal looked like?" The scout said, "According to them, the immortal is very powerful. They couldn't see his face clearly, but he seemed to have a head of white hair. Could this person be?" The purple-robed elder squinted his eyes and couldn't help but think of the golden sword he saw in Dongzhang village. At that moment, an incomparably wonderful artistic conception swept over and poured into everyone's heart, accompanied by a faint pressure. The purple-robed elder was startled at first, then his expression changed drastically. This is someone trying to break through to the Emperor's throne realm." Plop, plop, plop. Under such an artistic conception, the 300,000 soldiers all knelt on the ground and uncontrollably knelt in the direction of Lin and County. "Old Wu, look." Liang Wu stretched out his hand and pointed to the southern sky. The purple-robed elder hurriedly looked over and found that all the clouds in the sky were activated and surged toward the sky above Lin and County. From afar, he could see that the sky above Lin and County was filled with dense clouds that looked like a huge cotton candy. As expected, as expected!" The purple-robed elder gasped and said with a horrified expression, "I was right. Someone is trying to break through to the Emperor's throne realm. Could it be that someone in the Great Kuan realm is about to be crowned as an emperor?" Liang Wu was even more terrified. If an emperor's throne expert was born in the Great Kuan dynasty, then all his efforts in the Zenith Heaven realm would be in vain. Once the emperor's throne was enraged, the world would be swept away. "General Liang, you can let the army return the way they came. I must go and take a look." The purple-robed elder took a deep breath and said. He then broke through the void and rushed toward Lin and County. Lin and County outside the altar. At that moment, Lu Ziyuan and his daughter had already knelt on the ground, enduring the impact of the pressure coming from the center of the altar with fear. At the next moment, the void beside them began to distort. Then, a dozen figures broke through the void and arrived. The leading person wore a golden robe and stared at the altar with his golden eyes. "Someone is trying to break through to the Emperor's throne realm. Ha ha ha, I didn't expect the old Emperor to come. It seems like this is a big commotion." As the void shook, a hunchbacked elder tore through the void and landed on the ground. Swoosh, 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 another dozen or so figures descended. In just a few breaths, more than 30 people descended, and each of them was a martial sage expert. All the martial sages in the Great Kuan realm are here. The Zenith Heaven realm purple-robed elder, who was hiding in the distance, was shocked. His gaze fell on the golden-robed elder. "Even the old emperor of the Great Kuan dynasty has arrived. Everyone, I know my Great Kuan very well, but I've never heard of anyone who could touch the emperor's throne realm." The golden-robed elder looked at everyone and said slowly, "If the person who is breaking through inside is one of you, please make an announcement as soon as possible. Otherwise, it will be bad if there is a misunderstanding." The others did not say a word, and their eyes flickered. A cold glint flashed in the golden-robed elder's eyes, and killing intent surged like a tide. "Looks like this person is most likely not from my Great Kuan dynasty." Then, he took a step forward. He seemed to want to approach the altar. "You can't go in." At this moment, the white-clothed girl hurriedly said, "That senior said that anyone who enters the forbidden area will die." "Forbidden area?" The golden-robed elder smirked coldly. Then, he shot his gaze towards the center of the altar and said loudly, "I am the first emperor of the great Kuan dynasty, Huyanzhua. May I ask which fellow is breaking through here? Please come out and meet me." Rumble. As soon as he said that, a thunderous sound suddenly sounded above the altar. A terrifying pressure enveloped the entire altar, as if it wanted to crush it. Huyanzhua's intentions were not pure. He clearly wanted Yi Chen to show himself. In reality, he wanted to destroy his breakthrough. Chapter 1168. In the middle of the altar, Yi Chen sat cross-legged on the stream. A huge five-colored light lotus formed around him. The light lotus enveloped him completely. When the last trace of nascent soul power disappeared, there was a translucent little light figure in his dantian. The little light figure imitated his movements and sat cross-legged in his dantian, forming a seal with both hands. At the next moment, the little light figure turned from translucent to solid. Its body gradually grew until it was no different from an ordinary person. Whether it was its facial features or temperament, it was no different from Yi Chen. At that moment, a thunderous voice suddenly exploded between heaven and earth. "I'm Huyanzhua, the first emperor of the great Kuan dynasty. May I ask which fellow has broken through here? Please come out and meet me." As soon as the voice fell, the spiritual energy between heaven and earth became chaotic. It charged at Yi Chen's location like a torrent. At that moment, the primordial spirit in Yi Chen's body opened its eyes at the same time. It was like an emperor had awakened. There was no emotion in his eyes that a human should have. There was only endless coldness. His eyes were like those of a newborn baby. They were black and white without any impurities, and they carried an indescribable aura of spirituality. His gaze passed through the five-colored lotus outside his body and saw Huyanzhua and the rest who were thousands of meters away. He saw everyone in the great Kuan realm like a god looking down on the world. The path of cultivation focused on refining essence into qi, refining qi into spirit, and refining spirit into void. Soul formation was to condense a primordial spirit in one's body. As long as the primordial spirit was not destroyed, the physical body would exist forever. Once one entered soul formation, it meant that they could borrow the power of heaven and earth. "Is everyone here?" Yi Chen swept his gaze across and saw Huyanzhua and the rest who were thousands of meters away from the altar. "Not bad. Not a single one is left behind. I'll send all of you on your way." He stood up slowly, and the five-colored lotus that wrapped around him cracked gently. The clouds in the sky dissipated. Emperor Brush shot out from his body. "Congratulations on breaking through to soul formation, Your Majesty. You're just a step away from ascending to the immortal world." At the same time, thousands of meters away from the altar, seeing that the phenomenon in the sky had completely dissipated, everyone present was in a state of confusion. He succeeded? Could it be that the person inside has stepped into the Emperor's throne realm? Someone narrowed his eyes, feeling uneasy. No one responded to him, because everyone present was a martial saint. Even though they were very close to the Emperor's throne realm, they had never experienced breaking through to the Emperor's throne realm. Ah! The golden-robed old man, Huyanzhua's expression changed several times. Suddenly, he let out a loud laugh. "Failure! This person has failed." As soon as these words came out, the crowd turned pale. A thin old man at the scene couldn't help but narrow his eyes and say, "Why does Emperor Huyan say this?" The others all looked at him. Huyanzhua was the first imperial lord of the great Kuan dynasty. He had existed for the longest time and was an 8th-revolution martial saint. It would not be an exaggeration to say that he was the #1 person in the great Kuan realm. It could be said that among all the martial saints present, His words were the most persuasive. Meeting everyone's gaze, Huyenjue coldly smiled and said, "Everyone, you may not know this, but this old man was fortunate enough to see a powerhouse trying to break through to the Emperor's throne realm. At that time, when this person was about to succeed, a void shackle appeared in the world. This void shackle is the greatest barrier that prevents anyone from stepping into the Emperor's throne realm." He seemed to be reminiscing and said, "At that time, this old man's old friend also encountered the void shackle. Unfortunately, he failed to break the void shackle and died." "Emperor Huyen, you mean that this person failed to break the so-called void shackle when he broke through?" Someone was surprised. The rest of the people's eyes lit up. If they hadn't heard it with their own ears, they wouldn't have known that the process of breaking through to the Emperor's throne realm was so secretive. Huyenjue shook his head slightly and sneered. This person couldn't even draw out the void shackle, let alone break it? That's why this old man concluded that he failed. Someone said with a regretful expression, "In that case we missed a peerless opportunity to witness the birth of an Emperor's throne powerhouse. Everyone, let's go in and take a good look at who is breaking through here," Huyenjue said with a faint smile. Then, he took a deep breath and took the lead with a murderous look on his face. He was already sure that the person in the middle of the altar was definitely not from the Daluo dynasty, and the price was naturally death. Boom! The 30 martial saints rushed toward the center of the altar in a mighty manner. Everyone had different expressions on their faces. The white-clothed girl who stayed behind asked with a puzzled expression, "Father, what are they talking about? Did that immortal fail?" "I'm afraid these people are going to harm that person," Lu Xuan sighed to himself. Although he was not from the cultivation world, the 30 or so people present still gave him a great deal of pressure. To him, Huyenjue and the rest had the advantage in numbers. If they really wanted to harm Yichen, the latter might have they failed? The purple-clothed old man who was hiding in the distance narrowed his eyes and said thoughtfully, "Judging from the reactions of Huyenjue and the rest, the person who is breaking through to the Emperor's throne stage is probably not from Great Kuan." The distance of 3,000 meters was covered in the blink of an eye. Almost at the same time Yichen put away the Emperor brush, Huyenjue and the rest landed less than 30 meters away from him. At that moment, countless eyes looked at Yichen. When they saw that the person they wanted to see was only a young man in his 20s, Huyenjue and the rest were shocked. "This person is so young? I think I'm overflowing with talent, but it took me 1,000 years to reach the martial saint stage. Even if the other party is an old monster who can maintain his appearance, he shouldn't be this young, right?" At that moment everyone present was shocked. Yichen ignored their gazes. However, after glancing at the 30 or so people, he was slightly surprised. There were as many as 30 martial saints. In the Tianfeng Sea area where he was previously, there were only a dozen martial saints at most, and this Great Kuan had double that number. This showed that it was indeed the central state. Huyenjue stared at Yichen for a while before saying expressionlessly, "Did you break through again just now? So what if I did?" Yichen said coldly. Huyenjue's pupils constricted slightly as he spoke again. "You look unfamiliar. I don't think you're from Great Kuan, right?" "That's right." Yichen nodded slightly. An old man in a black robe with a snake staff took a step forward and sneered. "So, did you kill the people from my fallen spirit sect here?" "Yes, I did." Yichen nodded. "Fellow Taoist, you're really arrogant." Huyenjue was so angry that he laughed. "Since you're not from Great Kuan, you entered Great Kuan's territory to break through and killed the people from Great Kuan's fallen spirit sect. Do you think Great Kuan is a vegetable garden?" End of this chapter. Chapter 1169. Following his words, cold killing intent erupted. Cold killing intent exploded at the scene as they locked onto Yichen. "You're wrong." Yichen stood with his hands behind his back and shook his head as if he was disdainful. "It's too much of a compliment to describe Dakuan as a vegetable garden. In my opinion, Dakuan is at most a cesspool." The people in it are filthy and smelly. What shameless boasting! You're just a piece of trash who failed to break through. How dare you be so arrogant in front of us? A thin old man sneered mercilessly. Then, he moved and slapped his hand down to grab Yi Chen's head. Let me fight you! Rumble, as his palm struck, the space above Yi Chen's head showed signs of flowing backward. Then, it was torn apart forcefully. However, Yi Chen did not do anything as if he did not see it. He merely lifted his head and glanced at him. 2 gleams of light flashed in the depths of his eyes. Ah! The man screamed and fell to the ground with a thud. His eyes were wide open as if he had died with a grievance. How is this possible? Everyone's pupils constricted violently. One had to know that the person who attacked just now was the patriarch of the Grade 8 sect, Violet Cloud Doc, in Dakuan, a second-rank martial saint. A glance. However, the white-haired young man in front of him merely glanced at him and the patriarch of Violet Cloud Doc died on the spot? Junior brother! With a furious roar, a martial saint broke through the air. He opened his mouth and spat out a huge cauldron. He then pressed it down on Yi Chen. However, Yi Chen remained unmoved. However, a gleam flashed through his eyes again. Rumble, the cauldron, which was known as a spirit treasure, shattered. That person screamed and turned into a bloody mist. Dead silence. The world was dead silent. In just a few breaths of time, 2 martial saints had died. From the beginning to the end, they did not even see how the other party had attacked. Who exactly are you, sir? The old emperor of Dakuan dynasty, Hu Yenjue, sucked in a breath of cold air as he stared at Yi Chen. As an 8th-revolution martial saint, he believed that he could kill the 2 people from before, but it would definitely not be as easy as Yi Chen. Thinking to this point, a thought flashed through his mind. Could it be that this person is a saint from a certain sacred ground? The person who will kill you. He then took a step forward. Lightning whizzed on his right hand as he charged at Hu Yenjue and the rest. Aren't you being too arrogant? Even if you have strange techniques, you're still just a martial saint trying to break through to the emperor's throne realm. Hu Yenjue flew into a rage. His killing intent surged out like a tidal wave. Everyone, let's attack together and kill this person. Kill him. Extract his soul and refine it. Boom! In the blink of an eye, the killing intent of the 30 martial saints surged into the sky as they attacked together. Their killing intent covered the entire sky. Die! One of them opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of golden light that slashed towards Yi Futian. It was a golden flying sword that let out a tiger's roar that could cut through the sea. Clang! Yi Chen flicked his finger and forcefully crushed the golden sword. The broken pieces shot back and shattered the other party's body instantly. Kill! The 2 martial saints charged over. Their hands covered the sky and shook the world. They seemed to want to beat Yi Chen, who had his back to them, into meat paste. Both of them were 5th Revolution martial saint. In the Great Koan realm, their combat prowess could be ranked in the top 10. Ultimate Emperor shocks the world. Hu Yenjue let out a long roar. 9 extremely sharp and overbearing golden dragon chi made the sun lose its color. They surged at Yi Chen, clearly trying to distract Yi Chen. Yi Chen remained unmoved in the face of the attacks from the 2 people behind him. Instead, he extended his palm and clenched it at the 9 dragon chi from afar. Rumble! As the sky shook violently, the 9 golden dragon chi were actually annihilated into thin air by his grasp. Ugh! Hu Yenjue could not help but spit a mouthful of blood. Die! At the same time, the 2 5th Revolution martial saints who attacked from behind him charged at him. Their hands were almost about to land on Yi Chen's head. The 2 of them could not help but sneer. At that moment, they did not know if it was an illusion, but they realized that a strand of white hair had fallen from Yi Chen's shoulder. Ah! This strand of white hair grew with the wind, and like a heavenly sword, it instantly chopped off their heads, annihilating even their souls. What technique is this? Some of the martial saints who were participating in the battle were extremely shocked. He killed 2 martial saints with just a strand of hair? Rumor has it that an emperor's throne powerhouse can make the sea boil with a drop of blood essence, and a strand of hair can kill an army. An emperor's throne powerhouse. This person is an emperor's throne powerhouse. Everyone couldn't help but tremble, as if they had seen something terrifying. Who exactly are you? Huyenjue felt a chill run from the bottom of his feet to the top of his head. Earlier, he thought that Yi Chen had failed to break through. However, the other party's few simple techniques had mercilessly wiped out the only fantasy in his heart. I told you, I'm the one who killed you. Yi Chen's expression did not change as he charged at him directly. Huyenjue retreated and roared, Senior, I'm the first emperor of the Great Kuan dynasty. I, Great Kuan, am a subordinate of the Great Yin dynasty. I know the emperor of the Great Yin, Di Xianxiang. The emperor of the Great Yin dynasty, Di Xianxiang, was a famous emperor's throne powerhouse in Zhongzhou. Then you deserve to die even more. Yi Chen pressed forward step by step, and the coldness in his eyes intensified. The Great Yin dynasty. If the emperor's throne powerhouse of the Great Yin dynasty had not launched a sneak attack and thrown him into the void rift, how could his body have been crushed by the violent void storm? How could he have been left in Zhongzhou with serious injuries, sealed off his 6 senses, and become a fool in the eyes of others? If it was not the Great Yin dynasty, how could he have been separated from his daughter? Since he wanted revenge, he would start with a bloodbath in Great Kuan. This was just the beginning, not the end. No. In the face of life and death, Huyenjue's entire cultivation base erupted, and a shocking saber gleam suddenly shot out from his body. The saber gleam was like a waterfall, and it was a vast expanse of whiteness. It was as if endless saber intent covered this world, shocking everyone. Final struggle. Yi Chen scoffed coldly. He waved his sleeve and forcefully dispelled the saber intent that filled the sky. When he turned around, he saw Huyenjue and the other martial saints using this opportunity to break through the void and escape into the distance. Yi Chen stretched out his hand and his palm swept across the sky. It was like a majestic mountain ridge that stretched for a radius of 3,000 meters, controlling everything. The figures of Huyenjue and the rest appeared in the sky. When nearly 30 people saw the palm that swept past their heads, they were all shocked to death. End of this chapter. Chapter 1170. Father W. Look at that. What's that? At the same time, the white-clothed girl on the ground stiffened, and her beautiful eyes looked at the sky in disbelief. Lu Ziyuan subconsciously raised his head, and his whole body suddenly froze. He saw a scene that he would never forget in his life. It was a huge hand that stretched for several kilometers. From afar, it looked like an upside-down galaxy. The technique of an emperor's throne powerhouse. The purple-clothed old man who was hiding in the dark looked at the huge hand that could collapse the sky. His face was filled with shock. This is the technique of an emperor's throne powerhouse. An emperor's throne powerhouse was the peak of the ancient, desolate realm. A single roar could shatter mountains and rivers. They were invincible and looked down on the world. He did not expect to witness it with his own eyes today. Bang, 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 bang. Practically in that instant, bursts of bloody mist burst out in succession in the void, followed by the appearance of several strange phenomena. A phenomenon from the heavens. This was the sign of a saint's fall. No, I can't accept this. Huyenjue spat blood repeatedly after witnessing the martial saints around him being killed by Yi Chen's hand. He separated, roared, and fled. As the first emperor of the Great Kuan dynasty, I swear to step into the legendary emperor's throne. I want to see the Great Kuan dynasty advance to the Great Kuan dynasty. I can't die. Rumble. Yi Chen's hand extended again. It extended 5 kilometers away directly. It was really like a majestic dragon surging in the sky. Bang! As the hand descended, it directly slapped Huyenjue down from the sky, forcefully slapping him deep into the ground, causing the mountain range to be reduced to flat ground. At that moment, a soul shot out from where Huyen Zhuo had fallen, as if it wanted to escape. "Can you escape?" Yi Chen mumbled softly. He took a step forward and traversed several kilometers in the blink of an eye. "Emperor, save me, save me!" Huyen Zhuo's soul was hysterical. Boom, in an instant the space shook. A giant hand slapped down from the sky, aiming at Yi Chen. "You finally can't help but attack?" Yi Chen's eyes turned cold, and his killing intent was shocking. "Do you think you can do this to me a second time? Break!" In the next moment, he charged toward the giant hand and threw a punch with his right hand. Rumble, a loud bang shook heaven and earth. The space collapsed. The arm collapsed under Yi Chen's punch. "It's you." Even so, there was still a gasp in the void, and it seemed to be extremely surprised. Yi Chen's voice was mighty. "Great Yin's Emperor Lord, Di Xuanxiang, I'll remember you. I'll kill my way into your great Yin sooner or later. I'll be waiting for you." Following a cold snort, the void returned to its previous tranquility. It was as if the previous exchange was just a dream. At the same time, hundreds of thousands of kilometers away, Ing, who was wearing a black dragon robe, turned into a giant and attacked a golden shadow. His murderous aura soared into the sky. "Di Xianbing, how dare you get distracted while fighting me?" Yi Chen grabbed Huyen Zhuo's astral body and grinned, revealing his white teeth. "Look, even the Emperor's throne powerhouse behind you can't save you. Senior, let me go, let me go. I, De Kuan, can submit to you. I'm willing to be your loyal servant." Huyen Zhuo was in despair. Before he could finish speaking, Yi Chen closed his palm gently. Dust scattered with the wind. "An Emperor's throne powerhouse is so terrifying." The purple-clothed old man who was watching from the side trembled. Yi Chen glanced at Lu Ziyuan and his daughter, who were on the ground. Then, he looked at the southeast corner in disdain. "Have you seen enough?" At that moment, the purple-clothed old man felt an earth-shattering thunder rumble in his ears, causing him to vomit blood repeatedly. He could not care less about the shock inside of him. He leaped out immediately and knelt before Yi Chen respectfully. "Wu Gaomin of the Daluo dynasty's martial Saint Mountain greets the Emperor." He had never thought of running away. It was because the tragic fate of Huyen Zhuo and the rest was right before his eyes. If an Emperor's throne powerhouse wanted to kill a person, he would not be able to escape even if he went to heaven or hell. "Daluo dynasty?" Yi Chen frowned. Wu Gaomin placed his head on the ground and said in a trembling voice, "Sovereign Lord, my Zenith Luo and Zenith Kuan are enemies. In this 100 Empire War, my Zenith Luo is backed by the Great Qin dynasty, and Zenith Kuan is backed by the Great Yin dynasty." By Empire War? Great Qin dynasty? Yi Chen came to a realization and said, "Who is the ruler of the Great Qin dynasty? What's the 100 Empire War about?" Due to the fact that he had sealed his 6 senses during this period of time, he spent most of his time in a daze. He did not know much about the outside world, and he knew even less about Zhongzhou. Wu Gaomin did not dare to raise his head to look at his dignity, nor did he dare to hide anything. "Emperor, you might not know this, but half a month ago, the Great Qin dynasty's ruler, Ing Yu, attacked Zhongzhou and established the Great Qin dynasty. He united the Demon region and the entire southern region to invade Zhongzhou. It was also the Great Qin dynasty's ruler who started the 100 Empire War in Zhongzhou. From then on, the ancient desolate realm fell into chaos." Hearing that, Yi Chen's eyes flickered. He shook his head lightly and said, "It's indeed Ing." Even though he was mentally prepared, he did not expect Ing to play such a big game of chess, directly messing up the entire situation in Zhongzhou. He became the ruler of the Great Qin dynasty. Could it be that he has also stepped into the Emperor's throne stage? Could it be that he found his avatar? Thinking to this point, he slowly retracted the pressure on Wu Gaomin and landed beside the latter. Wu Gaomin raised his head subconsciously, and he was shocked. His eyes were filled with disbelief. At first glance, he thought that Yi Chen was very young. He could not believe that such a young person was an emperor's throne powerhouse. At second glance, he felt that Yi Chen was a little familiar. Immediately after, his expression changed slightly as a thought flashed through his mind. He suddenly remembered the portrait that the great Qin dynasty's envoy had given him before he came. The man in the portrait was exactly the same. Could he be the person the great Qin dynasty's envoy was looking for? Yi Chen could not help but be surprised when he saw the former staring at him. "You know me?" "No." Wu Gaomin hurriedly shook his head. "How could I know someone like the great Qin dynasty's ruler? However, you seem to be the person the great Qin dynasty's ruler is looking for." "Ing is looking for me?" Yi Chen could not help but laugh. Then, he said while smiling, "However, it coincides with my thoughts. Coincidentally, I also want to know what's going on in the Tianfeng Sea area." He was very worried about his daughter. Even though he had killed all the martial saints in the Tianfeng Sea area, the great Li Emperor Shang Wudao was still alive. With Mu Kaiwei and the rest's abilities, they would definitely not be able to deal with him. Thinking to this point, his eyes narrowed slightly, and a cold gleam surged in his pupils. "Great Li Emperor, I'd like to see who can protect you this time. P.S. Chapter 3 has been updated for today. End of this chapter. Chapter 1171. In the ancestral hall of the Great Kuan Dynasty. The ancestors of the Great Kuan Dynasty were enshrined here. Regardless of whether they were alive or dead, they would leave a soul tablet here to be enshrined. The Emperor of Great Kuan led the many powerhouses and looked at the shattered soul tablets in the ancestral hall in fear. The shattering of the soul tablet meant that the person on it was dead. The second-generation Emperor of Great Kuan, Huyen Lai, is dead. The third-generation Emperor of Great Kuan, Huyen Sun, is dead. The fifth-generation Emperor of Great Kuan, Huyen Lei, is dead. The first-generation Emperor of Great Kuan, Huyen Zhua, is dead. With a series of crackling explosions, the highest row of soul tablets at the top of the ancestral hall exploded. Dead, Huyen Qing, the Emperor of Great Kuan, revealed a look of disbelief. "How is this possible? How is this possible? How could the old Emperor die?" The first-generation Emperor was the one who founded the Great Kuan Dynasty. His strength was also known as the #1 person in Great Kuan, and he was the closest to the legendary Emperor's throne powerhouse. Now, even his soul tablet had shattered. "No, I don't believe it." The Emperor of Great Kuan roared repeatedly, his expression filled with anger and ruthlessness. "Investigate, investigate ruthlessly. Even if I have to use all the power of Great Kuan, I'll tear this thief into pieces." Yes. Behind him, a dozen or so voices with powerful auras responded in a heavy tone. Then, they were about to rush out. Rumble, right at this moment, a foot descended from the sky and stepped on the Great Kuan Imperial Palace like a giant splitting the ground. All sorts of screams rang out in the ancestral hall. Some people tried to rush out, but it was too late. That foot was simply too big, and it directly enveloped the entire Great Kuan Imperial Palace. The Great Kuan Imperial family was destroyed. The remaining dozen or so martial saints of Great Kuan were dead. In the air, Yi Chen slowly retracted his right foot. He looked at the purple-clothed old man, Wu Gaomin, who was shocked, calmly. "Treat this foot as a gift from me to Ing." In Dongzhong village, the sky gradually brightened. The sun rose from the other side of the mountain, trying to illuminate the entire land. However, in contrast, East Zhang village was bleak. Broken fences and dilapidated walls could be seen everywhere, as well as the ashes of the fire. Old Zhang led the hundreds of people from Lin, An County, who had escaped to Dongzhong village, and began to repair their temporary residence. "It's too tragic." This was old Zhang's only remaining thought. He did not sleep for the entire night. First, he led his men to search every house, trying to find any survivors. However, all he saw were cold and familiar corpses. In other words, the father and daughter were the only survivors in East Zhang village. As for the hundreds of people who were begging for help, after a night of hard work, coupled with the excessive shock, they were already starving to the point where their limbs were weak. Left with no other choice, he could only find some food elsewhere. Fortunately, there was still half a storehouse of grain left in Squire Zhang's residence. It could be considered as temporarily solving the problem of eating for everyone. The things that troubled ordinary people were nothing more than clothing, food, shelter, and transportation. For refugees, as long as they had something to eat and a place to temporarily stay, they would be satisfied. But what should he do next? Old Zhang knew nothing. After experiencing so many disasters in one night, he was already numb. The only thought in his mind was to survive. When he thought of this, he could not help but glance at his daughter, who was sitting at the entrance of the village and staring blankly at the north. He looked at the half-eaten biscuit in his hand and walked over hesitantly. "Daughter, have some." Cui Hua remained unmoved like a stone statue. After a while, she said faintly, "Father, do you think Blockhead will come back?" Through the refugee's narration, she had completely accepted that the so-called Blockhead had immortal-like means. Yes, he will definitely come back. Looking at his daughter's eager gaze, old Zhang felt a little suffocated. He comforted her in a hoarse voice and turned around to make other arrangements. "Blockhead!" his daughter exclaimed. He turned his head to look by instinct and saw his daughter stand up and run toward the entrance of the village in high spirits. There, a young man with white hair and green stood slowly. He had a smile on his face, and his green clothes fluttered in the wind. "Blockhead!" Cui Hua wanted to hug Yi Chen excitedly when she got closer. However, she seemed to have thought of something subsequently and stopped in her tracks. She knew that the person before her was not the Blockhead from the past, but the immortal that her father and the rest were talking about. She was not worthy of an immortal. Yi Chen smiled faintly. He walked over and patted her shoulder lightly. "I'm relieved that you and your daughter are fine." Cui Hua's eyes dimmed. She then looked at Yi Chen in a daze and forced a smile. "Have you really recovered your memory?" "That's right." Yi Chen nodded lightly and said, "My surname is Yi and my name is Chen. I ended up here because I was injured by an enemy." "Enemy?" Cui Hua's expression changed slightly as she said nervously, "Is that enemy of yours very powerful?" Although she had never seen Yi Chen's means, her father and the rest called him an immortal. Did that mean that the immortal's enemy was also an immortal? "It's all right." Yi Chen shook his head with a smile. Immortal, benefactor, at this moment, many refugees in ragged clothes rushed over from the village. When they were less than 30 meters away from him, they knelt down in unison, extremely grateful. If Yi Chen had not saved them on the way to Lin An County, they would have died long ago. "Everyone, please rise." Yi Chen raised his hand and everyone realized that they could not help but stand up. They were even more shocked. He swept his gaze across and looked at the helpless and sorrowful faces. He could not help but sigh softly. "Your family died in the flames of war. I sympathize with you, but things will be different from now on." At the next moment, Wu Gaomin landed on the ground from the void. Yi Chen glanced at Wu Gaomin and said, "This is an immortal from the Daluo dynasty. He knows the Emperor of Daluo. Daluo is about to attack Great Kuan. I believe that he will treat you well after he unifies Great Kuan." No one said a word in the face of his comfort. They only looked at Wu Gaomin in disbelief. Meeting everyone's gaze, Wu Gaomin nodded slightly and said, "I can guarantee that when my Daluo army enters the country in the future, they will not bully you. I, the Emperor of Daluo, love the people and will treat you well. I will redistribute the land and give you cattle, tax exemptions, and other policies." Cheers came from the crowd. Yi Chen watched silently. He was not a saint. That was all he could do for these ordinary people. Fortunately, through his conversation with Wu Gaomin along the way, he learned that the Daluo dynasty was different from Great Kuan. He believed that after these people became Daluo citizens, they would have a better life. Zhangji Iron Shop in a temporary shed. Yichen could not help but sigh as he looked at the dilapidated walls around him. He had lived here for almost a month. Before he woke up, he had treated this place as his home. Thinking to this point, he could not help but bow to old Zhang and his daughter. Thank you for taking care of me all this time. End of this chapter. Chapter 1172. During the days when he was injured, it was old Zhang who saved him. It was also old Zhang's family who treated him like a family member. Even though Yi Chen could still recover without all of that, he still owed the other party a favor after all. How could he, Yi Chen, be an ungrateful person? What are you doing? Old Zhang was shocked by his sudden action and waved his hands repeatedly. I can't. To him, Yi Chen was an immortal. It was a blessing that he had cultivated for several lifetimes to be able to save an immortal. Of course. Yi Chen lifted his eyes and said with a smile after bowing to the end, in return, I can fulfill 3 of your requests. What requests? Old Zhang could not react at the moment. Before Yi Chen could speak, Cui Hua, who was next to him, looked at him and suddenly said, Are you leaving? Yi Chen said, That's right. Naturally, he would not stay here. Putting aside the fact that this was not his homeland, he still had to look for his daughter, Yuhan, and his parents. Although she was mentally prepared, Cui Hua still felt a lump in her throat after hearing Yi Chen's affirmative answer. She took a deep breath in and pretended to be strong as she said, We don't want anything. I just want you to remember me and Dad. Although she said that, there were still tears at the corner of her eyes. She did not allow herself to show her weak side. Old Zhang secretly sighed when he heard that. Yi Chen fell into silence for a few seconds. He then looked at the golden sword in old Zhang's hand. Give me this sword. As soon as the golden sword landed in his hand, he extended his hand and extracted a trace of bloodline power from Cui Hua's body. As he formed a seal with both hands, the bloodline power completely merged with the golden sword. Keep this sword. Yi Chen passed the golden sword to old Zhang again. If your descendants are in danger of being exterminated, use the Zhang family's bloodline to activate this sword. As soon as this sword is unsheathed, it can kill everything within a radius of 3,000 meters. However, you can only use it 3 times. Don't use it unless it's a critical moment. Remember this. He waved his sleeve, and a few bottles of medicinal pills and a cultivation method landed in old Zhang's hand. The medicinal pills in the bottle are divided into innate pills and some medicinal pills that can improve the human body's potential. The innate pills can allow you and your daughter to live for 100 years. Without waiting for the father and daughter to speak, he continued, As for that cultivation technique, it's called the 3000 style sky shaking hammer technique. It's tailor-made for the 2 of you to forge iron. You can cultivate it, and you can also pass it down to your descendant. However, you must know that a man's wealth is his own ruin. His series of actions caused old Zhang and his daughter to be incomparably shocked, and by the time they recovered from their shock, there was no one in front of them. Blockhead, Cui Hua's tears could no longer be held back as they rushed out. Unfortunately, it was still to no avail. Old Zhang looked at the thing in his hand with a heavy heart. A few seconds later, he bowed to the sky. He knew very well how great of an opportunity Yi Chen had given the father and daughter. It was also because of this opportunity that their Zhang family would definitely prosper. Yi Chen looked at the father and daughter on the ground from 100 meters in the air. There was a hint of relief in his eyes. The rise and fall of fate is the heavenly Tao. He murmured, then said to Wu Gaomin, Let's go. What he didn't know was that after he left, Cui Hua still didn't give up searching for him. Unfortunately, they never saw Yi Chen again until the day the father and daughter died of old age. On the other hand, their descendants had an inexplicable fate with Yi Chun. The moment Yi Chun left Dakuan, the Daluo dynasty, which had received the news long ago, sent their army to besiege Dakuan. In less than 3 days, Dakuan fell completely and became a vassal of the Daluo dynasty. Meanwhile, the Daluo emperor treated the people of Dakuan well according to Yi Chen's wishes. Especially in Dongzhang village, Old Zhang became the village chief under the election of the new villagers and renamed Dongzhang village to Immortal village. In the capital of the Daluo dynasty, Chongjing city, Yi Chen walked on the noisy street in green clothes. He lifted his head and looked at both sides of the street. He realized that there were countless peddlers selling their goods. Many scholars in simple clothes walked in and out in group. It was a peaceful scene. He had to admit that compared to Dakuan, the Daluo dynasty was much smaller. He could tell that the two emperors had different methods. Wu Gaomin followed closely by his side. The dignified martial saint was like a personal servant, introducing the customs of Dakuan to him. Yi Chen nodded from time to time. Just when he was about to continue walking, he suddenly heard a commotion behind him. The ground that was paved with green bricks began to shake violently. Countless people standing in the middle of the road scrambled to dodge to the side. Rumble, the shaking became more and more intense. Everyone subconsciously looked over and saw a black torrent of steel surging over from the end of the street. It was mixed with a monstrous, ferocious aura. As the black torrent approached, the clouds above everyone's heads were covered by the murderous aura. It blotted out the sky and the sun. It was terrifying. As the black torrent approached, a black and ferocious flag appeared before everyone's eyes. Yi. On the fluttering flag, the word Yi could be faintly seen. It seemed to want to stir the wind and clouds. At that moment, Wu Gaomin, who was next to Yi Chen, had a slight change in expression. He secretly exclaimed, "It's the Great Qin's envoy. The Black Dragon Guards. It's his Black Dragon Guards." The Great Qin's envoy? Yi Chen narrowed his eyes. He had heard from Wu Gaomin that the Great Qin's envoy seemed to have been looking for him. However, for some reason, he felt that there was a faint familiar aura in the black torrent. Rumble, as the black torrent approached, everyone could clearly see that it was a group of people in black armor. The armor was airtight, revealing only pairs of bloodthirsty and ferocious eyes. "Emperor, I think we should retreat," Wu Gaomin could not help but say. As the master of Zenith Heaven, the Great Qin dynasty naturally had a high status in Zenith Heaven. No one dared to provoke them. However, Yi Chen did not move at all. At the next moment, just as the steel torrent was about to collide with the two of them, it suddenly stopped. Its movements were neat and uniform. Within this group of thousands of people with astonishing murderous aura, the most ferocious and monstrous murderous aura swept out. When everyone saw the figure clearly, they were shocked to discover that it was a young man in black armor. The young man's fierce eyes swept across everything, looking disdainful and domineering. Everyone's gazes landed on the young man. Their eyes were filled with shock, and even Wu Gaomin was no exception. Even though it was a young man, he still felt a trace of cold danger from him. One had to know that he was a Fifth Revolution martial saint. Yi Chen stared at the young man in black. His initially calm gaze was slightly stunned. Subsequently, a hint of shock and not knowing whether to laugh or cry surged on his face. End of this chapter.